Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And joining me tonight is my good friend, Dee Pierce, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends. Hello, Dee. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing fine also. Thank you very much. I understand you were caught in a torrential rain on Monday.
Yes, yes, we were. Unbelievable. Madeline and I, well, actually, Madeline coordinated with her good friend Barry Bender and myself to what he had the books, a new book. So we were, he was delivering the books to me.
He was delivering 20 copies of the new books to you.
Yes, and there was the mass flooding. It was unbelievable, but we got there safely and back safely, and same
Caught
for
in the
Barry.
middle of mass flooding in New York City.
Yes, we left to, figuring rush hour traffic to get ahead of that. Little did we know we were going to be battling these floods.
Okay, what's the name of Madeline's book?
Fleeting glance. A fleeting glance.
Amazing.
Yes, it's going to be a very good book. I have to start reading it.
Okay, it's fiction, isn't it?
Yes, and it has to do with her experience when she was in the West Bank,
Oh, great.
and she, wrote a story about it. The fleeting glance when she was in that section of Hebron where they have the barbed wire on top, where they throw the garbage down on the people. The
Yeah,
Israelis throw the garbage down on the Palestinians.
yeah, she has a novel about that.
Yes.
Awful. I mean, a good novel, but that's
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And that's what really shocked Madeline. She could not believe it. She just couldn't believe that people would do that.
yeah. Now they're
Uh,
doing even worse.
yes.
But that was the first. Things like that are the first step, and then you graduate from there to killing people when they all come forward for food,
Yeah.
and you kill them in the middle of that. Well, okay. Um, so I see Steve Wolfbrand is there. Hi, Doc and D, and Evelina Pont is here too. Hi, everyone. And Steve Wolfbrand is on Facebook also saying hello, as well as, oh, Dawn Foster. I forgot Dawn is here too. Hi, Dawn,
It's good to see everybody.
everyone. It is good to see everybody.
And we got to share the show out.
Yes, we are. Thank you for reminding me.
Let everybody know we're live.
Yes. Okay, we'll do that.
Here we go. Go here.
Okay, we are live.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so, okay, thank you everyone for coming. Those who are here thus far. I'm sure we'll be joined by many others as we go through the evening tonight.
Yes, we will.
First up is a video featuring Pepe Escobar. Uh, and I'm going to share it. Start by sharing it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Pepe's got a way with words.
Yes. And let's see. Do I have this in the right order? I hope I have this in the right order. Yes, here we go.
Israel against Iran, which is a war against Iran using Israel and long term a war against China to break up China.
Okay. We're going to start about here. This is an interview with Pepe Escobar
Ideally, okay.
called Putin and Iran's Bombshell Stuns Israel.
Okay, let me just put the.
And I think this is with Danny Haifeng doing the interview. It's a conversation between Danny and Pepe Escobar. So let's start, and we'll be doing commentary as it goes on.
Okay, this is I'm daydreaming a little bit. A coalition of scholars and think tanks, BRICs wise, could be established to study all these declinations of imperial attack and, in fact, dementia in a holistic way, in an integrated way, and showing how this hybrid wars by the empire against BRICS members are part of the bigger war against the BRICS and the global south as a whole. Because the empire they need more territory. They badly need more natural resources and energy, wherever that is. In the case of the Middle East, obviously oil and gas. So they can control everything and perpetuate the unilateral domination that they enjoyed for decades since 1945.
The irony, of course, here is that if that new domination or renewed form of domination is based on gas and oil and continues that way, that will sign the death warrant of the human race. That is, even if we escape from nuclear war, which is the primary threat, okay, at this point, of course, reliance on gas and oil for energy is going to kill us all. So I think that's another irony of this whole attack on BRICS. In order to dominate gas and oil resources, what, are they crazy?
It comes back to what the most radical global south thinkers are saying upfront. If we don't come up with their own platforms, paradigms, systems, completely different from everything that was established by the Americans and imposed by the Americans after the end of the Second World War, we will continue to be dominated by them and be their slaves, essentially. Everybody says that. From Michael Hudson to a Bolivian ex-minister, which said exactly what I'm telling you now in Yemen in front of the former prime minister of Yemen.
I've tried several things.
And nothing resolved?
The only thing that really worked was this natural trick.
And this is what Ibrahim Traoré is basically saying in Burkina Faso. This is the key. And so, which brings us to what's going to happen at BRICS. Unfortunately, because the meek Brazilians are at the presidency, this is going to be a very disappointing BRICS meeting.
So this video preceded the BRICS meeting. We'll go through this video, where, of course, Pepe has already said some very critical things in just a few seconds. We've been watching it. But as we go through it, we need to note it, because the next video is Pepe after the meeting giving his evaluation.
Everything will be reported to the BRICS summit next year, which is going to be in South Africa. So we discussed this, obviously, and in many roundtables, this was discussed in St. Petersburg last week. And the Russians and ultra qualified Russians who follow the BRICS business discussions, for instance, or heads of think tanks, etc. They're saying, well, compared to what we did last year, the Brazilians did nothing this year. This is what they tell you, behind the scenes, which is true. Unfortunately, So, but this is what we've been discussing this past 5 minutes. This is what should be at the BRICS table in Rio. Okay, we are being attacked all over by the empire. The empire wants to play divide and rule with all of us and literally destroy some of us. How are we going to get our act together and act together geoeconomically, geopolitically, in the information sphere, in the AI sphere, etc., to counteract? There was an excellent panel on fake news and artificial intelligence. This was the panel I was in. I had the pleasure to be in with Maria Zakharova and former Austrian Foreign Minister Karin Neisel. Karin, now she's heading a think tank in St. Petersburg. And we were discussing how, for instance, how Brussels, how the European Commission is.
The panel was at the St. Petersburg conference where Pepe just was.
A fake news factory. How the former administration of that cadaver in the White House was a fake news factory. How the Trump administration now is a fake news factory. So how do you, and of course, how big tech, and now that we have Palantir integrated inside the federal government in the United States, they will be a monster fake news factory as well. Ultra sophisticated, totally digitalized, controlling everything, controlling all the narratives. So all of us in the Global South, this is what we're fighting for. It's not a joke. It's extremely serious. So if we don't have an integrated effort, it will be very easy for the empire to pick one by one and smash them all, which is what they believe they could do with Iran. But they chose the wrong adversary this time. The good old saying applies. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Libya. Iran is not Syria. Iran is not Afghanistan. Now you're going to see, this is the real deal. This is an ancient civilization cum regional power. It's not a joke. With 90 million people. Try telling this to that stupid Marco Rubio who doesn't know how many people live in Iran.
To the end here, I wanted to put up exactly as you said. You said, this is a war on BRICS. Iran is a major player in BRICS. And you have Donald Trump himself just absolutely exposing how this is the agenda here. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be regime change? This is straight from the horse's mouth.
There you go. He gave the game away. Yes, he gave the game away because of that ego the size of Neptune. He had to give it away. No?
Yeah,
it's part of the person.
Yeah. And then just I definitely want your analysis after this, because it's as you said, not only is this a war on BRICS and that the regime change is the modus operandi, but you also have panic. There is real concern about what could happen should this conflict move to a conclusion that is quite logical, which is the global economy being heavily affected by something like even a partial shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, which the Trump administration is saying, everyone keep oil prices down. I'm watching. You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. Don't do it. This sounds like panic and
childish panic. This it's like a 5-year-old is writing these posts. Wow, it's the lowest common denominator on anything. There's not 1 inch of analysis of reflection about what's going on. Nothing. And he's ordering everybody to do, you have to do what I want, otherwise I'm going to throw a fit.
Tesla is finished. Elon has failed. That is what they want you to believe. But tech expert Jeff,
It's beyond ridiculous. The only good thing about this stupid post is that he gave the game away. Yeah, it's a regime change war, no question. Main headline: this is a regime change war. Sub headline: this is a war against BRICs. That's it. This explains everything that is going on.
And this is such a historic moment, Pepe.
So, from Pepe's point of view, it wasn't a war about, Iran, getting, a nuclear weapon per se. That was just the camouflage. It was a regime change war, and it was a war to stop what's going on in BRICS. And I think these are the larger truths.
Tell me about it. I thought I had seen everything in my life. Not really.
The acceleration of this, though, is quite striking. Maybe talk about what are the things that you're thinking about in terms of what to watch out for. We know Iran is going to continue its operation, True Promise, 20 plus. And we also have promises from the United States. I don't know if this is in the cards now or sometime in the future that there will be more strikes on Iran should Iran not capitulate.
And don't forget the 500 tariff, which may be approved within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
I think that's a 500% tariff. It's something really crazy.
And we should all pay very close attention to the Trump administration reaction to the BRICS summit. There won't be something out of this world coming out of the BRICS summit. But even if there is a hint of unity among BRICS and a declaration that is forceful, defending BRICS, defending the BRICS project, which will go completely against the American project, which is divide and rule and chaos, how the Trump administration is going to react about that. And of course, after 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to see the results of the, let's say, the calculated Iranian strategy of strategic offense. Welcome to a long, hot summer.
Is this a war? The United States is talking very confidently about its capabilities, what it can do to Iran. But I again go back to Syria and Iraq, and there's a lot of officials that are speaking secretly, anonymously, saying, well, what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, even Syria took a long time, and that's not a stable situation. Iran is a different beast in many respects. So is this a war that the U.S. empire can win, Pepe?
No, they can't. And of course, the ones who are outside of the empire, former deep state operatives, former CIA, many of them our friends, they know by experience that the empire of chaos cannot win this war. And still they go. Well, this is the inner.
I think here he's not talking about the overall BRICS war, because he earlier said that the BRICS people have to get organized against the divide and conquer strategy, or that war will be lost. But here he's talking about the Iran war itself.
Inertia that moves empires when they are dwindling and when they are on their last legs. This one, the last legs may last quite a while, even a few decades, but it's inevitable. And I love the Putin metaphor in St. Petersburg. It's not that Russia and China are driving the multipolar world. The multipolar world is becoming inevitable like sunrise. We're just making it more, I don't remember exactly the word, but we are facilitating the birth of the multipolar world. This is exactly what he said. So it's great. It's a very simple metaphor, but it conveys the inevitability of a historical trend. There's no question about that. Try to explain that, Danny, to the American elites, the people running the show behind everything, including the circus ringmaster. It's the ultimate anathema. It's everything it's the geopolitical nightmare par excellence for all of them. If they were paying attention to Brzezinski, and they did, all of these guys read Brzezinski, and they thought that the Grand Chessboard in 1997 was brilliant. It's happening now, in front of their eyes, and there's not much they can do about it except bomb, 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 bomb like crazy. Is that enough to secure empire dominance? No, it's not.
No,
The world is moving. The world is already moving the other way.
So there are conflicts in the thoughts, okay, of Pepe Escobar. He warns of the BRICS nations they have to get organized, and they have to stay organized to counter the efforts of the United States, okay, and the globalization elites to try to divide them and to stop the multipolar world. Okay, but so there he expresses some doubts that there will be success. But then on the other hand, he thinks the trend is too strong to stop, and that we are seeing the emergence of the multipolar world at this point.
So that's what, the contrast between St. Petersburg is so stark, but it's so clear. If you're following both sides, it's very, very clear. But it's going to be a very tough, long struggle and very painful.
Yeah.
They won't let go.
No.
And the images that the image that Putin used of sunshine, I could contrapose with a Bob Dylan image. A long dark cloud is coming down. The empire is the long dark cloud coming down over all of us and trying to obliterate the sunshine. So it's up to all of us to make sure that the sun really shines, rises, and shines. So this is wow. Talk about an existential situation. This is the destiny of the 21st century and beyond. It's right in front of us. It's being played now.
Nerve pain, do not take gabapentin.
So let's see if there are any comments on that.
Yeah, I see Jeffrey Denton is here. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hi, Jeff. How are you? It's very good to see you here again. And Dawn says, I was reading that Zionists see Palestinians as animals, not humans. I think that's true. That's certainly the way they treat them. And it's hard to treat people that way if you don't see them that way. Steve says he shared on Facebook. Thank you, Steve. Jeff says, hey, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Steve says, hi, Dawn. Jeff, I guess, smiling. Steve advises everybody to subscribe. Thank you, Steve. Everybody should like, share, and subscribe if you've not already done so. And Steve G2, also known as Steve Gonzo, is here. Steve Wolfbrand says hi, and Steve Gonzo waves. So did you have any comments on that video, Dee?
No, I don't really have any comments.
Okay. So let's move on. Oh, Steve Gonzo says, Trump ordered Australia and Japan to get ready for war with China via the Mirror. I'm sure Australia and Japan are hurrying to get ready for war with China. Not. I mean, Japan's biggest trading partner is China. And I think now China might be Australia's biggest trading partner also. But I don't think either of them have any stomach for a war with China. But we want everybody to get ready for a war with China because we're trying to get ready for a war with China. But I don't think the American people have much stomach for a war with China, especially considering that that's likely to be a nuclear war. Okay, let's get on to the second of our videos. It's also from Danny and Pepe, but it's following the BRICS conference.
Once again, as they proved in BRICS last week,
Started this one off at about
Oh, but I didn't know.
let me make sure I got it in the right place. Oh yeah, it's about 7:45. That's close enough.
All right. I misspoke. I have one more question before I unleash you
Yeah.
on the BRICS. What is the view of the Kremlin and what is the view of BRICS of Netanyahu's slaughter, war crimes, and genocide in Gaza?
that was expressly condemned, Judge, in the final declaration, which was released late afternoon on Monday in Rio, on the first day of the BRICS summit, not on the second day, the first day. They had, the Sherpas were working on this declaration for the past few days before it was released 24/7. And the main points, in fact,
Okay, the Sherpas are the organizers, okay, of BRICS. They've adopted that term to describe themselves.
one of the main points was the language to condemn the attack on Iran. From the beginning, they had already all of them, all 10, and this was later sent to the other 10 partners as well. They agreed on the language on Gaza, which is an unrestricted condemnation, which coming from a multilateral organization is pretty serious, much more serious than the condemnations that came from the UN.
They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear this.
Tell us about the final declaration. I understand from your communications that it addressed finance, security, and culture. Let's start with finance. What was agreed? What will BRICS be doing? What can BRICS do with respect to commercial transactions between and among its members?
The number one economic financial takeaway of the whole summit, Judge, and this was announced personally, even before the start of the summit, that was on Friday afternoon. In fact, a day and a half before the start. At the end of the BRICS Business Council, we spent a whole day in a beautiful reconverted warehouse by the port in Rio, with business people from all over the global south discussing projects, etc. At the end, and at the end of another meeting of the NDB, the BRICS Development Bank, the Russian finance minister, Anton Siluanov, announced, and his rhetoric was quite telling. It was precise, but it was very incisive. He said, from now on, the NDB, the BRICS Bank, headquartered in Shanghai, may, he didn't say will, he said may, but in a sense that we're working towards, become the main platform to finance development projects and mega projects across the BRICS sphere, bypassing SWIFT.
Mm.
The subtext, Judge, of what he said is this is de-dollarization in action. You don't need you don't need to tell it. You don't need to say it.
So exactly what Trump is afraid of, exactly what he's been condemning, exactly what he's been concerned about. So if Trump was declaring war on BRICS and was threatening BRICS, then by doing this, BRICS has thrown down the gauntlet.
But this is de-dollarization in action. And this is something that especially the Russians and the Chinese have been working on steadily since before the summit last year in Kazan, all over the year of 2024. I remember very well because I was in Russia for 6 months following that week after week and talking to the people from the BRICS Business Council, people from the Russian Ministry of Finance as well. This is a number one priority. It starts with the NDB, the BRICS Bank. It will expand to direct trade between BRICS members. In the case of Russia and China, they're already transacting 90% of their trade in their own currencies. We want and expand to the other ones. And on top of it, we have the NDB, the BRICS Bank, financing projects by passing the US dollar as well.
So if I want to wire money to you in Moscow to pay you for the dinner that I owe you, can I do it bypassing SWIFT? Can I do it from the US to Moscow bypassing SWIFT?
Not yet, Judge. And there's the rub, of course.
So you have to wait for the money that I owe you.
Because they are testing different models. One of them is called BRICS Bridge. Some people in New York, for instance, they heard about it, but not many people inside the US. There is a system which is coordinated by the Bank of International Settlements called M-Bridge. What happens? Example, the Thais want to buy oil from the Emirates. Do they pay in their currency or the Emirates currency? No, they pay with this unit called M-Bridge. So the BRICS want to use this unit to all the 10 BRICS members and then expand to the partners as well. So this, and it's direct, automatic. You don't need a currency. Transactions by SWIFT, sometimes they take, well, I remember, I'm part of it. Sometimes when I need to have money transferred, you have to wait for 5 days to have the money transferred. Can you imagine company to company? And when they need to do a lot of business. So this is another mechanism as well. So it's what we decided to call last year the BRICS Lab. They are testing all sorts of payment settlement models. And sooner or later, there will be a critical mass that they will launch probably 3 or 4 different settlement systems. And everybody brings in the table and the partners will adopt it.
The second subject matter addressed by the...
So just to be clear or to amplify a little bit, right now, there are, I forget the number of BRICS, 12 members of BRICS right now, and maybe 20 partners, but soon to be 20 members of BRICS. Within a few years, BRICS is probably going to be, at 80 members. They will have the majority of the GDP of the world, and they will be doing the majority of the trading, of the world. And what Pepe just said is that that trading will not be done, using the dollar.
Declaration. I'm saving the best for last, security. The second subject matter was culture. What was addressed with respect to culture in the unanimous BRICS declaration?
Well, this is the famous, to quote our friend, comrade Xi Jinping, peoples to peoples exchanges in Chinese terminology. Means, for instance, there was a day before the summit where we had a very strong debate on media alternatives to big tech controlling narratives all over the world. And of course, the soft power control of culture and media by the West. So one of the proposals is let's have a BRICS-wide media network, including fact-checking by BRICS members, public and private, to counteract this, let's say, imposition of one truth only by the West. There was a letter that came out of it, and very, very interesting. This letter was handed out personally for a BRICS partner member, President of Cuba, Diaz-Canel. I think it was extremely relevant and enormous significance that's the representative of a government that has been stigmatized and harassed by the United States government for decades now is, let's say, the coordinator in the back of this new media alliance. And some of the media that we work with, for instance, 3 of the media that I work closely with, they made a deal in Rio, Sputnik in Russia, Guanxia in China, and Brazil 247, a portal in Brazil, the largest one, a progressive portal, to increase their cooperation. So soon we're going to have all these new media alliances and corporations, BRICS-wide, and the BRICS nations won't be submitted to these diktats coming from big tech and from American mainstream media or Western mainstream media, which, by the way, their coverage of BRICS in Rio was absolutely pathetic.
What did the
Yes, their coverage was absolutely minimal. I mean, it was like there was nothing happening at all. When obviously, based on what Pepe is telling us here, a lot of important stuff was happening.
declarations say about mutual or collective security?
Very important. BRICS is not a military alliance. This is not explicitly detailed in the declaration, but it's part of the discussions, and it was part of the very important first discussion in the first day, in the opening day in the morning, where we had the President Lula opening and President Putin went online. It's an absolutely key issue because BRICS has been accused of being anti-Western. No, the Chinese academics have a wonderful definition. BRICS is the post-West environment.
Ooh, wow.
Post-West is brilliant. This means the system of international relations, geoeconomic and geopolitical, established after the end of the Second World War is dead from BRICS' point of view. And they're working to establish a new one. The West may join or not. It's irrelevant if the West joins or not, because this high-speed train has already left the station.
So it's interesting that the West may join, or at least that's what was being said at the conference. So, I mean, apparently the United States may join if we want to. Of course, right now we don't want to. We just want BRICS to go away, and we're threatening it in all sorts of ways.
This is expressed in very diplomatic terms at the final declaration. But in the round tables and in the business discussions, they're already on it completely.
Do these BRICS nations fear Trump's tariffs?
Yes. Yes, because which brings us to why Brazil is on fire now, Judge, since, let's say, a day and a half, in fact. When we were having a roundtable in Rio on Wednesday night, this is when we learned in the middle of our roundtable about the 50% tariff. And the room, and then, of course, our debates about BRICS, Eurasian integration, all that, everything concentrated on now Brazil is being attacked directly by the United States government. 50% is a pretty serious deal. Just to give you an example, Brazil is the largest exporter of orange juice on the planet. 95% of their production goes abroad. Half of it goes to the United States. for the Brazilian producers of orange juice is an absolute disaster. So they have to find tomorrow, if the sanctions start to be applied on August 1st, new markets in Africa, in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, etc. But it's a complicated process.
And if that happens, that will raise the price of orange juice in the U.S. because
in the U.S. Absolutely.
Deplete the supply.
Yes.
It
So,
is.
People are really going to be mad at Trump if they can't get their orange juice in the morning. Now,
Oh, definitely.
Perception.
okay, it so happens that I hate orange juice. I never drink it. But I'm really a lone wolf in this respect. I think 95% of the people drink orange juice in the morning, don't they, Dee?
Yes, I don't, but a lot of people do.
So we are two who don't, evidently. But I think that's interesting. I'm sure there are lots of MAGA people who drink their orange juice in the morning and who will be extremely angry that the price is going to double.
Somehow, the Trump administration is going to swindle something to blame somebody else to keep it off of Trump, that it's not him, it's somebody else, even though it is him.
I think that's not going to work at all. Okay, I think what Pepe is talking about is the threat to impose 50% of tariffs, on Brazil, if they keep on prosecuting the Bolsonaro case, because he's very angry that they're taking legal action against their former president. Okay, just to remind people here, Bolsonaro and his presidency actually was part of a special operation that succeeded in framing the current president, of Brazil, Lula da Silva, and actually putting him in jail for how long was it? 3 years? Or something like that. He was in jail for 3 years, and he was put in jail so it was possible for Bolsonaro to be elected, as president. But the facts of that case later came out, and Lula had to be released from prison, and then he ran again for the presidency, and he won. But of course, here's Trump interfering directly in the internal affairs of another country and using tariffs, which are an economic instrument, as a way to try to politically dominate what's going on in Brazil. This is absolutely ridiculous.
In Brazil, that Trump is doing this because of the Bolsonaro trial, as Trump stated, which makes the tariff illegal under American law because he can only do it for economic reasons, not political reasons.
So there the judge contributed something I didn't know that was illegal under U.S. law. I'm very glad to find out that it is.
Absolutely correct, Judge. Illegal under American law and under international law as well. Very, very important. Considering the immensely significance that the United States has a trade surplus with Brazil. For the past 15 years, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me, it's over $400 billion U.S. surplus in the trade balance between the U.S. and Brazil. So this has nothing to do with trade. Commerce.
So from Trump's own standpoint, a trade surplus is a benefit for the country that's getting the surplus. Now, this is not true, actually, from an MMT point of view. From an MMT point of view, a trade deficit is a benefit, not a trade surplus. Okay, but from Trump's point of view, the trade surplus, is a benefit. So, in order to get a fellow dictator out of trouble, he's willing to cost the United States $400 billion of benefit that he perceives, in order to punish the country that is giving us a trade surplus. I find that incredible.
Or geoeconomics.
Wow.
This is a plot to interfere directly in a third country's internal domestic presidential race, which is going to be in Brazil next year, with the Trump administration and Trump himself personally aligning with his ally Bolsonaro and the Bolsonaro gang, the whole family, or whoever they manage to appoint.
And tell me that Trump has a tough character on his hands in President Lula.
Yes, because Lula is very good at the fight, Judge. Lula is a fighter. He's an excellent articulator. He never runs out of a fight, even in his old age, you know. And he's already, what he said so far is very measured. But he said, look, basically the Brazilian reaction was a return to sender reaction. He's going to send this letter. Okay, we're not interested in your letter. Take it back. If you start applying your sanctions, there's going to be reciprocity.
Understood.
We're going to go 50% on you as well.
Understood. But before I go, what a role at BRICS was played by our mutual friend, the greatest diplomat on the planet, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
From the beginning, Judge, Lavrov is one of the, let's say, masterminds, in a good sense, of BRICS. Creation of BRICS, expansion of BRICS, and the role of BRICS today as, let's say, overtaking every red line imposed by the empire. BRICS is now at the center of the whole discussion about reforming the system of international relations. And this was proved by the summit in Rio, even if before many of us, we had low expectations for the summit for a number of reasons. But at the end, after the preparatory 3 days and the 2 days of the summit, I said, wow, the Brazilians in the end delivered, not only the Brazilians, but BRICS as a whole delivered. It's not only what's contained in the final summit declaration, but the tone of the discussions and the drive amongst all that. Look, we have to keep the ball rolling, and now it has to be fast. Now we're going to start playing offense.
Wow. Pepe, thank you very much for this. I know it's an odd time of day and an odd day of the week for you, but I appreciate you spending the time with us. It's a fascinating conversation. I hope we can resume it next week.
Of course, definitely. Thank you, Judge. Thank you so much.
Safe travels, my dear friend.
And we will be covering it also through what Pepe has to say about it next week when he gets back on the show. But to summarize the overall thrust of it, it appeared at the start through the first video that Pepe expected very little to come out of this conference. But actually, on the financial end of things, there was a tremendous amount of activity in the conference and a tremendous amount of progress on the de-dollarization front. There was also considerable progress on the cultural front, and then even some progress on the defense front in terms of people realizing that they had to come together, they had to stand up together, they had to defend each other against the attacks that were going to be coming from the United States. So, to summarize it, or to give a summary of my own, it seems clear that the BRICS conference this year, contrary to expectations, and contrary to the fact that only a small amount of work was done to prepare for the conference, compared to what the Russians did for the Kazan conference of last year, still, the momentum coming out of this conference was there, and it was very definite, and it will serve as a basis for further growth, of BRICS. And I expect to see in the near future perhaps 20 full members of BRICs and 20 partners before the next BRICs meeting occurs, which will probably be, rather than being in the summer of next year, it will probably be in the fall, of next year. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at some of your comments. And here we go. Fry Steve says, hey, Doc, AD. Hey, Fry Steve. And Steve Gonzo says, the Hague Group action now includes 32 countries. And Steve Gonzo says, insane sanctioning, Francesca. And Evelina offers Bolsonaro, as opposed to Bolsonaro, for us to consider. Steve Gonzo says, the UDF finally had orange juice and eggs after 3 months. Okay. So, let us then, have you anything to add, Dee?
Just happy to, hear all the different progress where BRICS is concerned.
Yeah, I think it was far from a disappointment,
Right.
actually, and perhaps that's a measure of the fact that the momentum of BRICS continues on, that things are changing and developing fast, and that this is a real threat to the hegemony of the collective West.
Oh, it is, and they're panicking.
And they're panicking, and we're going to be seeing a lot more conflict over the panicking this year. We also need to add, I think, that the war with Iran becomes a key for them. Okay, because Iran is central to the Belt and Road Initiative, the East-West Initiative, in order to have the integration of Europe, and Asia. And it's also central to the North-South corridor, which the Russians are trying to forge, starting from India and going through Moscow, and into Europe. And of course, going through Iran. Iran is a key transit center for the North-South corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn Foster said, that's what's wrong with you. You don't like orange juice, laugh out loud. That could be. I get my vitamin C from other sources other than orange juice. Okay, so let us get on to the next piece. This piece is absolutely wonderful from Alistair Krug. Okay, it's another interview, with the judge. The judge just had some really stunning interviews on Monday of this week. It was a really banner day for him and produced a lot of news for us. So the next one is this interview with Alistair Krug. Let me take a look at where to pick it up exactly. Okay, this is at 156. So let me get that out of here. There we go.
Time. Alistair, welcome here, my dear friend. Good day to you. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. What was Trump's goal, in your view, his true internal, maybe discussed with just his inner circle goal in bombing Iran mouth.
Hey, Dee, we're getting a lot of static from Colby, I think.
Okay, let me put my mute on.
Okay.
I think that the true goal, and it was very clear from his discussion on the 22nd of June when they attacked the 3 nuclear sites, was that he had been persuaded by people in Washington and also the people it was just very, very vulnerable. And that there was underneath it a seething mass of Iranians longing to see, if you like, what they call the mulocracy removed. And that then there would be an upsurge and there'd be a revolution. And it would end up like Syria. It would end up like Syria, very much affected. And that was what happened on the 13th, the attempt to do this. And it failed. It failed completely. Technically, it was very clever operation. It took months to put it into place with pre-positioning weapons and equipment into Iran through the Kurdish Erbil entrance, and also across by Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan played an important part in providing access for not only for missiles, but also airspace by which the Israelis could use their standoff weapons. What was it all about? It was about that, because it was about actually destroying the state of Iran. That's what he hoped for. And on that day, on the 22nd, as I mentioned and wrote about it, Michael Wolff was saying, he kept saying, it's wonderful. I mean, they're going to win, aren't they? This is going to be the game changer. This is going to be a fantastic move. And the Israelis are so clever. So he was expecting that. And of course, strategically, it was a bust because actually what has happened.
This morning on Fox and Friends, a wife's testimonial about the baking soda trick went viral with 15 million views. See what she revealed.
Don't try this baking soda trick unless you're ready to last all night until she says stop.
And I want to touch on that, is
Sorry
that
about that.
Iran has not only emerged more unified and more consolidated as a society, it has emerged with a strong sense of Shi'i identity and Iranian identity that is embracing everyone. You only had to see what happened in the streets, but there's another aspect, and something why this whole process is not really working is because the other day it was Muharram. That is the celebration of what happened at the Battle of Kerbala when the Prophet's grandson was killed by the forces from Damascus. And it is a very symbolic state. And it has fired up Shiism everywhere. And so what inadvertently Washington is doing, it's starting a new war in the Middle East, sectarian war. ISIS is back on the scene in Syria. What's happening in Syria is terrible. Really, there are mostly the Shi'i Alawites, the Shi'i, are being slaughtered, thousands. And many of their women, their wives, their daughters being taken as wives of ISIS, of Al-Qaeda members in Syria, sex slaves, in other words, just as we saw ISIS doing before in Iraq. But
So, okay, the CIA, the Israelis, the Turks, MI6 collaborated to get rid of Assad and to turn over Syria to the former number 2, of ISIS. And since he has taken over Syria, he has let his people run wild, killing Christians and killing Shias, in Syria. And that is a lot, of what is going on there. Because because we wanted to see the replacement, of Assad. And we thought that would be some kind of improvement in the Middle East situation. And when it happened, our people figuratively were dancing in the streets because this was such a wonderful victory for the intelligence forces of the United States, our collaborators.
Mm-hmm.
And now we see the actual result.
Yeah. And I was going to say that we see all around West Asia is this slaughtering of Christians. And I'm like, in the West here, where are all these people who claim to be Christians?
Yeah, where are all these evangelical Christians who are mainly concerned with supporting the Israelis, while their fellow Christians get slaughtered both in Israel and in Syria?
Yeah.
Because we are using the ISIS people, Sunni extremists, as a tool for our foreign policy ends. It is totally without any moral compass. It is totally corrupt.
Definitely corrupt.
Done there. It is a moral corruption. It is a moral evil.
Oh, sure.
The
Yes, it
slaughter
is.
going on of Christians and of Shia and of sectarianism. And so this is building also a huge feeling amongst the Shia everywhere in the Middle East. Don't forget, if you look just at the Middle East, you leave aside Indonesia and Malaysia, which are big Sunni states, probably the Shia are just about 50-50 or a slight majority in the Middle East. They're not.
Yeah, we have to note there also, Pakistan is a Sunni state. Afghanistan, is a Sunni state. So the Sunnis, certainly outnumber the Shia if we look at, if we go past the area which is normally known as, as the Middle East. But Alistair is right. Inside of the Middle East, it's a 50-50 split. And that's part of the Middle East conflict that we're seeing now.
Not just a minority, they are a major fragment, major sector of power. And these are becoming very, if you like, agitated and very determined to change what's happening. So you had just a few weeks ago, 4 of the most influential Shia clerics, not in Iran, but around, if you like, the whole Shia world, including led by Grand Ayatollah Sistani in Iraq, wrote statements saying that if this attack went on, and particularly on the supreme leader, they would call for an ijtihad fatwa. They'd issue, in other words, a mandatory call on all Shia to join in the war against Israel and the United States. This is the consequence of what's happening. And now what we see, the big fated movement that was supposed to happen in Washington, and that there would be a deal and all would be all right in Gaza, and that would set the scene for Abraham Accords 2.0. I mean, not only did that not happen, but what we're seeing now is that Trump's envoy in Lebanon, Mr. Barak, has warned the Lebanese they have a choice. Either they have to disarm Hezbollah completely. Hezbollah, the Shia of Hezbollah, are really a majority, and they win the elections. in Lebanon, the local elections in Lebanon. He's saying to them, he's saying to Lebanon, you have Syria on one side, you have Israel on the other side. You either do that or else you will lose Lebanon. There will be a war, and Syria, coupled with Israel, will invade and will break up Lebanon and create a new Al-Sham, Greater Syria, so that the northern part of Lebanon, which is Sunni fundamentalists, will go to Syria, and Lebanon will disappear off the map, and it will just be a bigger pro-Israel Syria. And it's the Israelification of this part of the Middle East they are attempting.
Right.
But it's more likely to start a civil war in Lebanon. The Shia have already said, Hezbollah has said, categorically, we will not disarm, whatever America says. But that is the ultimatum that has been given. So we're seeing.
But the Shia, as Alistair says, has already given their answer. Their answer is, we will fight. So expect to see his Hezbollah much more active soon in attacking Israel again. And of course, they will be allied with the Houthis, also Shia, and Iran, and the Shia of Iraq will be there fighting alongside them, and the very existence of Israel will be threatened, this time.
The whole of the Middle East, if you like, affected by, it's a return to 10 years ago, with ISIS now playing a role in, if you like, in Syria and in Lebanon and in Pakistan and in Iraq, of course. All of this is heating up and is become highly volatile because of the bombing of Iran, first of all. And the attempt to kill the supreme leader, one of what they call the Mahjar, the leaders of Shia Islam around the world. So it's created a big, strong pushback. And of course, Qatar and Israel are pushing this, using this ISIS forces in Syria. Just as 10 years ago, I've been through this movie so many times now, when the West fires up the extremist Sunni, if you like, radicals to go out and kill people who are different, who are Shia or Alawite or some other sect, which they don't like.
For anyone struggling with high blood sugar, do not drink cold water. Thousands of people are now.
And of course, I mean, this is a setting not for creating, if you like, this isn't going to bring about the Abraham 2.0 solution. It's going to create mayhem in the area. And also, even although I mentioned we use the term Salafists for these radical ISIS type of forces, but ordinary Sunnis are actually being radicalized too in favor of Iran and the Sunnis. Not as in mass, but important Sunni groups are now showing their allegiance to Iran. So we're working it up, and of course, Iran is preparing for the next part of this war. So you have two wars now going on in the Middle East: the war on Iran, and then you have the war on Syria, Lebanon, and on Iraq as well. And then, of course, you have the other three wars in Russia and China taking place. And all of those are going badly. So not only the Gaza did fail, the Gaza sort of summit in Washington didn't produce a solution, but Iran did not produce any outcome. It produced the opposite. Iran is now the leading state in the Middle East. It's a very strong state. It's a big state, 90 million people, and with weapons and resources to match.
Let
And
me
let me
ask you about what you think the White House's thinking was. I mean, did Mossad so radically misjudge?
I think the term thinking should be in quotes.
The likely outcome in Iran? Did the CIA and MI6 so radically misjudge the likely outcome to the Trump bombing in Iran? Or did Netanyahu and Trump just disregard professional intelligence data and do what they wanted to do?
No, they completely misread the ground. Completely misread the ground. They really believed that, after what had happened to Hezbollah and the assassinations of the Hezbollah leadership, including Hassan Nasrallah, they really believed that if they did a decapitation strike in Iran, killing their leading scientists and their leading military commanders, and perhaps they tried to kill the supreme leader and the clerics at the same time. They thought then it would collapse because they persuaded themselves that Iran is this house of cards. And it is believed, just as you hear the same story endlessly played. This is why I call it the blunders of hubris. You see the same story about Russia. I don't need to remind you, you've heard it often enough on this channel. Russia is weak. Its economy is collapsing. Any moment now, Putin will be pushed out and there'll be a revolution and it will all change back and they'll have someone placid and westernized to deal with and they can carve up Russia and get its resources, just as they hope to do in Iran. And it is the same story. How many times have you heard China is weak and it's easily, and the tariffs will force it onto its knees? All of these things have been completely and utterly misjudged because of the sort of psyche in Israel and its persuasion. And clearly they had persuaded, Trump that this was what was going to happen, just as they persuaded the neocons and the others who persuaded Trump, it seems, now to escalate against Russia, which is going to be a huge mistake. And all of this is really compounded by the fact that the financial side of it is proving to be a mistake too. Look around the world. All of the states, apart from Europe, are trying to combine together to challenge the sort of shock and awe of tariffs, and are not accepting it. And China certainly isn't. But other states, even coming and talking to the Europeans and saying, look, we can't have this. We're not going to do this. So, I mean, we will see a big, I think, exit. If it's anything like Lindsey Graham suggests, what is going to be said tonight by Trump, that they're going to start seizing the frozen Russian assets, that they are going to take them, and that then Europe is going to use those or other means to pay for America to send more long-distance missiles to attack Russia, and that they are then going to sanction Russia. If it's all of these things, I mean, well, it's the beginning of the end of the Trump project. It is the decomposition, I believe, of the whole project. It's that.
Okay, so we have to note here that Trump's announcement of what he was going to do with respect to Ukraine was not what Lindsey Graham said, okay, it was going to be. It was more a face-saving sort of move, announcing there would be some weapons for the Ukrainians, there would be a 50-day period which was given to Russia to come to some kind of settlement. But who knows what's going to happen in 50 days. And also, who knows what kinds of arms we're going to have to give to Ukraine in 50 days, because we have a situation where apparently the inventories of arms which the Ukrainians are sinking are down. Our inventories are down to 8 days. 8 days worth of inventories. That includes inventories we have to keep for ourselves. So it's really highly debatable whether in the end there will be any inventories to give to Ukraine after 50 days. It's also questionable whether Ukraine will be there in 50 days because of the intensification of the Russian attacks. We now have a situation inside of Ukraine where city after city is now falling, but day by day. Progress for the Russians is now very, very quick. People are predicting that they will get across, the Dnieper, the Dnieper, I should say, very soon, and that at that point they will turn towards the conquest, of Odessa. Also, Kyiv will most probably go. They've been softening Kyiv up with attacks of terrible intensity. Kharkov, of course, will also go. And we're looking at another 4 of the oblasts falling to the Russians, probably over the next 50 days or so. And we're looking at the imposition of a settlement on Ukraine by the Russians over that period of time. Also, the sanctions threats of Trump were far less than expected. And, of course, his pattern is to threaten things and then back off, and threaten things and then back off. Because what happens is the coming tariffs are apparently very disruptive, and political opposition grows, and then he backs off, and it's just a very confusing and chaotic pattern of things, which is not good for the United States. But the point is, you can't take his threats at face value anyway, because he is always changing. So, but his speech, to go back to the original point, was not consistent with the predictions of Lindsey Graham on Sunday. His announcement was not consistent with that. It was far less extreme, and there were many questions about the implementation of it.
Serious. That's serious.
He is prepared either to address the nation or to make some kind of a comment later today, Monday, July 14, on Iran. Do you expect he's going to go back to the Biden mode? We're going to give them whatever they need. We're going to take arms that we need and send them to Iran, or sell them to Great Britain, which will sell them to, I said Iran, I meant Ukraine, and sell them to Ukraine. What is he going to say tonight about Ukraine that will undermine his credibility and maybe
Ukraine or Iran?
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Well, that's what Lindsey Graham has been on television and sort of prefacing it and saying you're going to see a huge change. There's going to be, as I say, there's going to be action by the Europeans and the Americans to take some of the frozen assets and to use them to fund weapons supplies to Ukraine. There's going to be a big increase in weapons, long-range weapons that I don't know, we're only relying on Lindsey Graham's account of it. It's not, I don't want people to understand that these have actually been announced yet. It will be tonight that Trump will announce it. But he's suggested that there will be missiles that can strike Moscow or St. Petersburg long distance into Russia, and that they'll put the mother of all sanctions onto Russia, 500% sanctions on anyone purchasing Russian oil or gas. I mean, the latter is really just, I think, a joke. I mean, if they were really imposed, I mean, it would be end of the trading system, the end of the energy trading system. It would be a really, it's just, not really very, I mean, the whole package, I think, is likely to send the dollar diving because people will be saying it's not going to be dangerous.
Here's what Senator Graham said yesterday on this. Chris, cut number 2.
I expect in the coming days, you will see weapons flowing at a record level to help Ukraine defend themselves. I expect in the coming days that there will be tariffs and sanctions available to President Trump he's never had before. I expect in the coming days more support from Europe regarding their efforts to help Ukraine. Putin made a miscalculation here. For 6 months, President Trump tried to entice Putin to the table. The attacks have gone up, not down. One of the biggest miscalculations Putin has made is to play Trump. And you just watch. In the coming days and weeks, there's going to be a massive effort to get Putin to the table. And to those who are helping him, China buying cheap Russian oil and having no accountability, those days are about over.
To be very clear, Putin never played Trump. Putin's statements of his goals, and what he wanted, his conditions before a settlement, have been very clear and very consistent for over a year and a half now. The Russians, both Putin and Lavrov, have been very clear concerning the conditions. It's Trump who has been trying to get the Russians to change their conditions. And they keep coming back to Trump, and they keep on telling him the same things. We want to get at the causes of the war. The real causes of the war. And the real causes were the foreign policy of the United States and the rest of the collective West to try to weaken Russia and even perhaps dismantle the Federation, and to do it by using Ukraine as the stalking horse. Any settlement has to remove those conditions. The Russian position is there cannot be a ceasefire based on the idea of a frozen conflict, because the frozen conflict will not settle the question of what caused these conflicts in the first place, will not get at the root cause of the problems, and will not produce a solution which is permanent and which provides for the security of the Russian state. And the Russians will not accept any settlement that does not provide for that, because basically the threat from Ukraine has been an existential threat for Russia, and they will not agree to the continued existence of that existential threat. So it's all been very clear from the start. It wasn't Putin who was playing Trump. It was Trump who was trying to play Putin, and it was Trump whose efforts at playing Putin have failed. And now Trump is walking away mad because his efforts have failed. And that's the true story of what is going on. Lindsey Graham is just another liar.
And World War III is what they're looking for. Is the United States going to put missiles in Ukraine aimed at Moscow and St. Petersburg, as you alluded to earlier? We're back to where we were when this thing started, when NATO wanted to harm Ukraine.
That's not what I was saying. It was what Blumenthal and
Right.
and Graham were saying. But I'd just like to say, at the end of this Sergei Ryabkov, who is the deputy foreign minister of Russia, and gave an interview to TASS in the last day or two. And he said on this, that all the aspects of the basis, the very starting blocks for normalization, haven't even begun. So what I'm talking about is, you remember that the United States seized the diplomatic premises of Russia, consulates and other buildings that belonged under the Vienna Treaty to Russia. None of them, there's been no progress on returning. There's been no progress on, if you like, establishing flights between Russia and the United States. There's no progress even in nominating a US ambassador to Moscow. And he said on all of these, this is the first steps to our relationship with the United States, and nothing has happened. And I mean, so, what's going on? I think it's just the same thing as before, that it is thought by the Trump and his team that they can just, trick, entice Putin into what I call an attritional cage by putting more weapons into Ukraine and trying to sort of wear him down till he's forced to accept a ceasefire which is against Russian interests, so that the war can be kept going, so that the war can continue for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it takes to weaken Russia and finally, they hope, break it up. But all of this is, this is just hype. I don't think it will happen. But what is the other, that's the only explanation. Why has not a single move been taken? Ryabkov is a very serious diplomat. I know him. And, he speaks actually in low key. He isn't dramatic. And he says, nothing is happening. So what if you're Putin and you're Russian, you assume, this is deliberate. They are not prepared to do anything to really make the relationship work. So what they are doing is simply trying to sort of coax Russia into giving up on its own interests, so that America can count this as a great success. But I would like to return to Iran, because you mentioned Iran a little earlier. And I wanted to say that is also moving to a very serious point, because I think what is today, on the 15th, I think it's Tuesday.
People with type 2 diabetes make is taking metformin, instead of just eating this cheap fruit to flush out blood sugar naturally.
Tomorrow, the Euro 3 are about to start the process for snapback of sanctions on Iran. They've said that. They formally said they're going to launch the process of snapback of sanctions. At the same time, the Europeans are telling Russia, and they're telling everyone, they want the IAEA to go back into Iran. Now, it's the IAEA, I don't know what to say. They're about as popular as a herd of skunks at the moment in Iran. They need massive protection. They are so unpopular. They're regarded as the authors of, the killings of their scientists and other things. But the combined thing is going to push Iran towards leaving the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. It's inevitable, because they are not going to have the IAEA coming back in that sort of free mode they had before. They can have certain, subject to the Security Council complete monitoring. But if there is an attempt to do snapback elections, which will then be mandatory for all UN member states to impose on Iran, I think you will see that. And what does that mean? It's going to trigger another round of war because Israel will say, look, they've cheated. They probably kept the uranium, enriched uranium. They probably still got it. And, we are committed to making sure that it doesn't reach a bomb. Actually, what the Israelis believe, and genuinely believe, is that there's no way that they can guarantee that Iran will not get a bomb as things stand, even with inspections and technical means. The only way is to have regime change and to put in a Western government, a Pavlov or someone like that as a Western puppet. That's the only way they see it. So, round two is coming. So we have that, and we have the escalation in Russia. We have the wider escalation going on, not only in Syria, but also in Azerbaijan, which the West, NATO, and Britain particularly are heating up and using not only against Iran, but they're using this Caucasus state against Russia. The Russians are throwing out many Azerbaijanis because it's largely criminal groups in there who the Russians believe were possibly responsible for that spider's web attack on the strategic bombers, that they facilitated the positioning of equipment. I mean, these are really, there's been a long history of Azerbaijanis having criminal groups there.
You're painting a picture as if we're on the precipice of World War III.
Yes, that is the picture that he's painting. And we're going to hear more about that in the videos coming up with Scott Ritter and also Colonel Macgregor, as well. But let's go on and get some clarification of this picture from Alistair Crook.
I'm painting a picture that because of these three egregious mistakes, actually everything is heating up across the globe. It's heating up even in, in the environment of China too, where states are being very much pressed to join in a trade boycott of China. And China is not going to accept that. So everything is heating up everywhere at the same time. And that's why I say, this, what's proposed we'll hear tonight for Russia, what's going to happen after Tuesday if the Euro 3 then trigger snapback sanctions, what's going to happen if really Israel with US backing starts a war in Syria and Lebanon. I mean, another war there. What's going to happen with China, with more tariffs? All of these things are coming together in a sense to make a perfect storm, yes. But it's actually also the point at which you can say what the world is watching is the decomposition of Trump, of him. He is becoming, not only hubristic, but it is extending beyond the capacities of the United States resources. He's overextended the United States to such an extent that this is going to be a real crisis. And all these other things are adding to it, the sense of no credibility, the sense.
Before I go on with that, I just want to focus on the military preparedness of the United States. Remember, I talked about the 8 days of inventory left for the kinds of weapons that Ukraine needs, for the kinds of weapons that Israel needs also for further military action, on its side. We do not have the weapons. Last time on Saturday night, we went over a video where Colonel Macgregor pointed out that he didn't think the Israelis and the United States would be ready for another round until September. I think he's right, but I think September might even be quite optimistic, because I don't think that the U.S. Military industrial complex can make up the losses which the Israelis, the Ukrainians, and the United States have sustained, in earlier actions. We are short, of interceptor missiles of all kinds. We are in a bad position from the standpoint of the production of new planes, because the Chinese, if we place these tariffs anywhere near the Chinese, they're going to cut us off from the rare earths we need to produce some of the military equipment that we're trying to produce. In other words, the capacity of the United States to renew the equipment losses of ourselves, the Israelis and the Ukrainians, are an issue. Whereas the Russians and Chinese and the Iranians too are outproducing us in key military equipment. We cannot keep up. The United States cannot keep up. If we attack Iran again in September, I think the devastation for Israel will be even worse than it's been thus far, and the defeat of Israel will be more thorough than it's been so far. Of course, the Israelis and the United States might try to turn around the kinds of balances I've been talking about, by using nuclear weapons, tactical nukes. In that case, I think we'll find that the Russians and the Chinese will be replying with tactical nukes of their own, and with, of course, the Oreshniks. The Russians now have hundreds of Oreshniks available, and they will be using them to good effect if we turn to nukes, because we don't have the conventional weapons, any longer. Let us go on.
That these tariffs, are not believable by some in the West, but in other parts of the world, they are a threat to their well-being. So there's a big change taking place. I think we are at the crossroads where there is the clear signs of, if you like, the decomposition of the United States Western project at the moment. And this is accelerating and producing a strengthening of Russia, Iran, and China, and the global South, and even the other states in Southeast Asia. Why was it Japan and South Korea didn't come to the recent NATO meeting?
Watch what magnesium does to your bowels.
If you have to wipe more than 4 times after you poop, here's why.
Because they disapproved of Iran. These are two closest, some of the closest allies of the United States are voting with their feet and with their pocket and saying, no, we disagree what happened with a sort of complete out of the blue attack on Iran. And what's happened in Iran is heating up the whole of the Middle East, because it is becoming a war again between the Al-Qaeda supported extremists, the fundamentalists who kill others who are not, if you like, Sunni militants, and who are now we see an increasing Shia riposte across the board, across the Middle East. And I don't know what the consequences of this will be, but I can just say it's not good news for, Abraham Accords 2.0. at all.
Alistair, thank you very much. Thank you for a truly brilliant and courageous analysis of all of this. We'll all be watching Trump tonight. We may need to call on you again very soon, but thank you for all of this. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Judge.
Coming up today, a busy day for you at 10 o'clock.
So I do agree with the judge. That was a stunning analysis in that video, extremely wide ranging, extremely prescient, and it gives us all, I think, a lot, okay, to worry about. Okay, let us see. Have you any comments, Dee?
Yeah, I thought it was very good as well. And, this leading up to with September, and it's good to hear analysis on all this.
I think it's good to hear that kind of analysis, such high quality analysis, so in depth in terms of the detail, and so wide ranging, and so knowledgeable about the various cultures inside of the Middle East
Mm-hmm.
and the cultural conflicts, the fissures, okay, that exist, and also the trends in public opinion as well, and what those trends actually mean for the various parties. It's also striking how often the intelligence agencies of the collective West are wrong in making vital judgments about things.
Well, they have an agenda, is what it is.
Yes, they have an agenda, and the agenda is coloring the way they see things.
Mm-hmm.
And they see things with glasses that are, rose-colored, and not, in line with the realities that exist. The idea that Syria, okay, and Iran were similar, somehow similar, and that similar things would happen. It was just foolish. It was always apparent from the beginning that Iran and Syria were two different situations, and that Iran was far stronger. And Iran proved that in various ways over the run up to the latest, round, okay, of war. And we weren't, really listening or watching or understanding. True Promise 2 should have been enough of a warning of what could happen to Israel if they continued to push it. Now, before True Promise 3, the Israelis made a brilliant attack on Iran in terms of the use of special forces and intelligence and groups that were non-state groups, joining, in the attack. It was a brilliant attack, and brilliantly executed, and very successful. Okay, on a level that was tactical, but it didn't touch the strategic capability of Iran to seriously damage Israel, to severely damage Israel. And in previous streams, we've covered the extreme amount of damage that was done to Israel, and the extreme damage that was done to the economy, okay, of Israel, and to the society of Israel. I mean, Israel was left at the point of collapse when the latest ceasefire occurred. Okay, while Iran, in contrast, was getting stronger as the days of
Mm-hmm.
went on. This was totally at variance with intelligence assessments of the CIA and MI6 and Mossad. They just didn't perceive that that would happen, okay, at all. And they certainly didn't count on the destruction of Mossad headquarters, or the destruction of the Defense Ministry of Israel, or destruction of Chaim Weizmann Institute, or the destruction of some of the Israeli air bases, or you could just go on and on and on for the whole evening. Well, the destruction of the refinery at Haifa, the port at Haifa, the port at Ashdod, the refinery there. I mean, the Israelis are in a bad way and have to recover to make another attack that's substantial. And as we've gone through here, there's a question about whether they'll be ready for a serious attack in September. And apparently they certainly have to wait until then to move. Now, I might be wrong about that. Maybe they'll surprise us. Steve Day mentions that Israel entered Syria today. Well, yeah, they've been entering Syria, right along, because they have forces in the southern part, of Syria. They've never left Syria. So any entrance into Syria at this point is just more Israeli troops going into Syria. But that means they have less troops for operations in the West Bank, and less troops for operations in Gaza, and less troops for operations in, Lebanon. And they're short of troops while Hezbollah has been rearming and re-strengthening itself, over a period of time. I mean, I think things don't look good for the Israelis and for the United States in terms of the foundations of, further military efforts. But we shall see about that. Dawn Foster says Trump really needs to be out. He's not doing well with polls. He needs to be in jail. Well, yeah, he does need to be in jail. But from our standpoint, what we really need is to have him out and have someone in there who at least is more commonsensical and more sensible. And I think it really comes down to basic common sense. Trump doesn't seem able to observe the consequences of his own actions and to look at them from some objective point of view and make adjustments that would seem to be indicated by obvious failures. So that's a problem. So let us move on to the next video. This is a Scott Ritter video, and it has many striking moments. We won't play the whole video, but okay, let me share the screen for it. It's the judge and Scott Ritter this time. And let's see, we'll pick it up at about 1:56 in. And play about a total of maybe 18 minutes of it. 18 minutes out of the 30 minutes. So.
Welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. Before we discuss your research and observations about Germany and some of the latest nonsense from Lindsey Graham, President Trump just a few minutes ago announced a rather seismic shift in his thinking, an increase in the amount of military weapons, or it sounds, he's so imprecise at times, like an increase in arms to Ukraine via a circuitous route of European nations. What is this going to accomplish?
Excuse my language, but not a damn thing. I mean, this is stupidity in the extreme. First of all, notice who's running this. It ain't Pete Hegseth. It's not the State Department. The CIA is running this, which tells you right off the bat that this is non-standard. It's a knee-jerk reaction that require, it's done outside of normal procurement channels. Where's the money coming from? And things of that nature. It's sleight of hand. There's nothing specific. What's the training associated with this? I mean, 17 batteries. People need to put on their thinking caps sometime when they hear this president open his mouth. 17 batteries, the full complement, he said. Does Ukraine have 17 batteries worth of soldiers trained? Who's going to train them? We know Spain has a battery dedicated for training Ukrainians.
What's a battery, Scotty?
A firing battery for the Patriot will be, I think, up to 3 launchers together with associated radars. The launchers will have, I guess it's a quad, 4 pods on them to fire off. So, you're talking, I think, 4, 8, 12, between 12 and 16 missiles ready to fire per battery. It's not an insignificant amount. Right now in Ukraine, the total they've ever had is between 6 and 8, but we know that most all have been destroyed. And when they get destroyed, it sort of takes the crews out with them, or at least good portions of the crews. And we also know that at some point in time, the manpower issue in Ukraine was such that because they didn't have Patriot crew or Patriot batteries available because the Russians destroyed them, these crews were diverted for other tasks, including some going in the infantry. So again, when we see 17 firing batteries, Ukrainians simply don't have people trained up to do this. So you throw the firing batteries in, and it's nothing. Also, we don't know what kind of Patriot they're getting. One Patriot is not like the other Patriot. If they're getting older Patriots, they could be systems that haven't been upgraded. They don't have the more modern missiles. They're incapable of intercepting the modern Russian ballistic missiles. We just don't know what's going on, and what nation's going to do this. For instance, Germany has 12 firing batteries available. That's it. 2 of those are in Poland, dedicated to a NATO mission in Poland. Germany's already provided, I think, 3 batteries to Ukraine, which have been destroyed. But Germany is one of the nations that Trump's leaning on here. Are they going to give all 12 up, knowing that they have nothing to defend themselves with, knowing that they've embarked on a process of providing dismantled Taurus missiles to Ukraine, and at some point in time, if Ukraine fires an assembled Taurus missile, that the Dusseldorf facility where these missiles were made were probably going to be hit by Oreshniks, nothing to defend it, politically suicide. This is the dumbest thing in the world. This president truly is the stupidest man in history. This is purely about political, cover his what. This is a man who has been embarrassed, humiliated by the fact that Vladimir Putin won't roll over and play dead for him, that he doesn't have a strategy, that he's allowed Keith Kellogg to box him into a corner. He's allowed the incompetence of Marco Rubio to box him into a corner. And then he's abandoned Pete Hegseth, who was simply acting on the instructions he was given to go America first and disentangle ourselves from a disastrous policy in Ukraine that's already taken $100 billion plus of our money. This is what President Trump said he.
So there, of course, is Keith Kellogg, the former general. He's a retired general, who's going to confer with, Zelensky. Okay, so that's just a little background video that's being shown there. But I do want to make an important point. What are these 17 batteries? They are air defense missiles. If there are 10 to 12 of those missiles per battery, as Scott had said, we're giving them 200, air defense missiles. Generally, Russians attack, those air defense missiles with drones, hundreds of drones, thousands, of drones. The air defense missiles or the Patriot batteries get destroyed by the drones. There are a lot of batteries. There are 17 batteries, But even when the batteries are not destroyed, even when the Patriot missiles are there to go after the Russian missiles that are used for attack purposes, the Patriots are in no way designed, to go after ballistic missiles or hypersonic missiles. They are in no way designed to go after the Iskanders or the Kinjals, any of the Oreshniks the Russians might, decide to use. They just can't cope with hypersonic missiles. They're not a defense for hypersonic missiles. The Russians are now beginning to use those more and more for intensive attacks on Ukraine cities. There, of course, have been recent very, very intensive attacks of drones and missiles on Kyiv, which has taken very sustained kinds of damage. And more recently as well, the Russians have begun to move over to the western part of Ukraine, to Lviv, and visit there with hundreds of drones, and missiles attacking. And the Russians are making those attacks now day by day. They're not intermittent. They're now becoming consistent. And the Ukrainians don't now have anything to reply with. And those 17 batteries aren't going to give them anything to reply with either, because the Russians are attacking with hypersonic missiles now. So we're talking about something that sounds good from the PR standpoint, but from a military standpoint is futile.
Wasn't going to do, and now he's doing it. And let me tell you,
why the abandonment of Hegseth, and how can the Central Intelligence Agency have access to equipment that's owned and stored by the Pentagon?
No, there's no U.S. equipment involved here.
This is the quickest way to fix yellow, brittle toenails without pills, polishes, or
That was a very pregnant statement by Scott. There's no U.S. equipment involved here. Let's explore that a little more.
They're not dipping into Pentagon stocks. This is a CIA arrangement. This is classically what they do. They're actually pretty stupid talking about it in the open because they're giving away things they shouldn't be giving away. But the CIA is going to nations that possess a weapon system, and then they're seeking diversion of that weapon system outside of normal American procurement channels, which means that if it's done covertly, you can bypass reporting requirements to Congress, or at least limit it to the Gang of Eight. Just get a presidential finding. This is how we move stuff around the world. This is what the CIA does. This evil stuff where we send weapons where they shouldn't be, doing things that publicly we couldn't link them to. But now the CIA, because this president is literally the dumbest man in the world, and they have a sycophantic bootlicker as the director of the CIA, who instead of telling him, saying, "Mr. President, don't talk about it. If we're going to do it, don't talk about it." But the president has to talk about it because it's about stroking his ego. So now they're going to go to Spain, and they're going to divert these Patriot systems to Spain through a European cutout, because there won't be any American fingerprints on this. They're going to pay for all this. And then what's going to happen is Germany is going to foot the bill to order new Patriot systems that'll backfill the Spanish ones. So there's no American equipment involved, new production, which again raises the question: is Spain going to give up its 5 Patriot batteries, just strip them away, and then wait how many?
That is a very good question. Why would Spain do that?
Years it's going to take to get new ones built and sent out, knowing that Israel has a procurement priority, knowing that the United States itself is seeking to upgrade and expand. This is stupidity writ large. It just I can't express my disdain for the president and for anybody who's advised him that this is a good thing.
Are these missiles the type that can only be operated by Americans because of the national security implications of the codes and satellite readings necessary to guide them?
No, no, no. There are advanced block versions of the Patriot that we provide to the Middle East. There's Middle Eastern consumers. Some of them might be involved in this stupidity that's about to take place. European consumers, NATO. If you're NATO, you might get you might have access to a more advanced version that my dog's protesting.
Maverick agrees with what you're saying about Trump.
The Maverick's like, he's an idiot. He's a jerk. Well, he actually said something else, but thank God we don't translate dog talk perfectly because we'd have to bleep it out. But the point is, no, you don't need American hands on this. This is not like ATACMS or things of that nature. These are export variant Patriots that have been approved for export to foreign nations. So there are literally no American fingerprints on this at all. No American money. This is just the CIA going into cutting. The CIA is one of the biggest arms dealers in the world, illegal arms dealers in the world. And again, the stupidity of the president to expose this aspect of the CIA's work the way he's done is stupid.
Here's his golfing buddy from over the weekend. Chris, cut number 2.
I expect in the coming days, you will see weapons flowing at a record level to help Ukraine defend themselves. I expect in the coming days that there will be tariffs and sanctions available to President Trump he's never had before. I expect in the coming days more support from Europe regarding their efforts to help Ukraine. Putin made a miscalculation here. For 6 months, President Trump tried to entice Putin to the table. The attacks have gone up, not down. One of the biggest miscalculations Putin has made is to play Trump. And you just watch. In the coming days and weeks, there's going to be a massive effort to get Putin to the table. And to those who are helping him, China buying cheap Russian oil and having no accountability, those days are about over.
What is he talking about?
What's wrong with buying cheap Russian oil?
He's just such a jerk.
I mean, cheap Russian oil. Well, that's good for the industry of the country buying the oil.
Exactly.
I mean, the oil may be at low cost to the people who buy it, but there's nothing wrong with the oil from a quality point of view. I mean, was Lindsey Graham trying to say there's something wrong with the oil? I mean, what, oh, they should buy expensive oil from the United States. Come on. I mean, that's ridiculous.
I have to watch what I'm saying here because this is, if there's anybody who's dumber than President Trump, it's Lindsey Graham. The ignorance manifest in what he just said. Lindsey, let me help you out here, you perfume princess. You're going to sanction China. Let me remind you, Lindsey, that in April, the president tried to put big time tariffs on China. China cut off America's access to rare earth minerals, including the kind of sophisticated magnetic materials that are essential for automobile production. The U.S. automobile industry is collapsing as we speak because they don't have access to the materials they need to manufacture cars, so they can't fulfill orders. So it collapsed. You know what the president did, Lindsey? He backed down immediately. Immediately. Began the lengthy process of renegotiating with the Chinese, but the Chinese didn't roll over and play dead, Lindsey, because they're in control, not the president. The president tried to play China, and China played him back. Now what?
So that's a pretty important point. The rare earths are a choke point for the automobile industry in the United States. China can shut down the whole American automobile industry if it wants to, just by denying the rare earths. Of course, the rare earths are even more essential for our submarines, for our F-35 and other jet planes. You use enormous amount of rare earths for the F-35s. And for some of the more advanced planes they're producing now. Now, we could have a rare earth industry that would produce a lot of rare earths here. We do have some mines, and we do have some new sources discovered in Pennsylvania, in other areas, but we've done nothing to develop the processing aspect so that we can process the rare earths so they can be used for our industry. So what we do is, even if we get some rare earths here, we send them to China for processing because they have the processing capacity. So this is the ridiculousness that Scott is telling us about here.
Happened is just recently they just entered a new deal, and now the American automobile industry is like, hey, we can get back on track. We got the magnetic materials, we got we're doing good. And now you're talking about putting 100% tariffs on China, you idiot. You think China's going to go, oh God, yeah, right. Keep flowing the rare earth minerals, guys. We just told the Russians that this is strategic. We sat down with the Europeans and said defending Russia is the most important thing in the world. But Lindsey Graham wants to put 100% sanctions on us. We surrender. You're an idiot, Graham. China's going to pull the plug on rare earth minerals, and the automobile industry's done. Trump will back down, and you're going to look like the fool you are. And that's just that. Brazil just said, you put tariffs on us, we will cut off all trade with America. Brazil's not blinking. China's not blinking. And you really think India is going to sink their economy because of your stupidity? Why the president listens to this failed individual, this failed human being, I don't understand. But again, I don't understand anything about this president because he never surrounds himself with experts. Hey, Donald Trump, call me. We'll fix it. You idiot. We can get peace again with Russia, and we don't have to destroy American industry in the process. Stop pretending you're a tough guy. You're not. You don't have the cards. You're carrying a pair of twos against Russia that you know has at least 4 kings on the table.
So we have to be very clear about this. Trump will never call Scott because Scott has called him an idiot. And that's unfortunate. Because sometimes...
Hi, my name's Dr. Frank Schallenberger. I'm 77 years old. And although I may look my age,
because sometimes you have to talk to people who think you're an idiot. You have to swallow your pride, and you have to go to people who can really do things for you. But not Trump. He'll never do that. He's incapable of doing that.
Fabulous. Are the neocons triumphant in this administration?
No, to be triumphant, you have to win.
Well,
I mean,
triumphant in that they have his ear. The Tulsi Gabbards, the J.D. Vances, whoever else was there saying, don't do this, America first. They're not saying anything.
But see, I don't know if it's about the success of their ability to argue or just the stupidity that's present. This is the easiest man in the world to play. I mean, Donald Trump is just, man, I wish I had people like him against me all the time because I can play him like a fine-tooth fiddle because it's all about his ego. I just have to find the things that, he's committed to for an ego-wise, address those, and I own him. He will do. Literally, Donald Trump is the living manifestation of why the OODA loop works. The OODA loop being the decision-making cycle, John Boyd's, how to shoot down airplanes applied to business and warfare. Get inside the decision-making cycle of your opponent, and you will own them. The Chinese, the Indians, the Russians, everybody, they're inside Trump's decision-making cycle. He is
Someday I'm going to do a stream on the OODA loop. And one time I did, I think it was 4 different blogs, on the OODA loop. And what it means, and some alternatives, to the OODA loop. So if people are really interested in that, I have a lot of material on that I can use.
Acting to them. That means that he's never in charge of defining the situation. He's reactive the entire time. And all they have to do is continue to play him, and he will spin out of control. And that's the end of the United States. We are literally headed down a path towards absolute failure as a nation. Economically, again, I just have to tell you, talk to the U.S. automobile industry, how they feel about what Lindsey Graham's proposing in regards to sanctions and what that means for rare earth minerals. And don't tell me that he's going to get it from Ukraine. Russia just occupied the second largest lithium or the largest lithium plant or mine in Ukraine. The rest of the rare earth minerals will go to Russia as well. The peace deal with Congo just collapsed. The 3 non-diplomats they sent ran away for their lives. And China is getting ready to pull the plug on it again because Lindsey Graham's an idiot. This president is the most easily played person in the world. So this isn't about a victory for the neocons. This is about a defeat for America. The neocons aren't in charge of anything. Donald Trump's in charge. His ego's in charge. And, and that's the danger, because they think they're playing him, but it won't. Sooner or later, he's going to get embarrassed. The thing about Donald Trump is that he's predictably unpredictable. He will commit today, and listen to the words he said. He didn't commit to anything up to 17, the tariffs in 50 days. He doesn't commit to anything because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. The people advising him don't know what they're doing either. So there's no hard plan here. There are no 17 batteries ready to go to Ukraine. That's a guarantee. That's just a number of a potential number. There may be a few flowing in the next couple of days, but not as many as he thinks. And when they get there, they're going to be destroyed. They're not going to be operable. They don't have crews. This is Donald Trump just being typical Trump. I mean, this is an embarrassment to America, and it's a danger to the entire world.
Last week, you described Ukraine as a...
I think the military analysis that Scott is giving here is very valuable, because it illustrates how ignorant Trump and his advisors are. They obviously have no understanding of the military capabilities they're proposing to send to Ukraine and the likely impact those are going to have. They're strictly offering this up as a PR thing in order to get people off their back who want to help the Ukrainians continue to kill themselves in this war. I mean, that's obviously what is going on here.
Hospice patient waiting to die. Can Donald Trump's armaments, can this scheme that you've just described possibly affect or delay that?
No, it's a shot of morphine. I mean, Zelensky's there crying in pain, and he's going to get a little shot of morphine. He's going to feel good for a moment, but it doesn't change the fact there's cancer inside Ukraine, destroying the Ukraine. And the cancer's named Zelensky. The cancer is the Banderist ideology that has captured Ukraine. The cancer is Europe and the United States that are using Ukraine as a proxy. It doesn't matter what Ukraine wants anymore. We're the ones that are driving a policy. We never even asked the Ukrainians what's good for them, et cetera. I mean, Zelensky's saying air defense, but we're not giving him air defense. We're not giving him anything. The Russians have broken the code on violating Ukrainian airspace, and they are flooding the zone with hundreds of drones a night. There will come a time, and within a month, they're estimating that Russia will launch over 1,000 drones in a night and be able to sustain that rate indefinitely, because they're producing more than 1,000 of these geranium drones every day. Russia's in full manufacturing mode on this, together with Iskander missiles, Caliber missiles, the whole thing. There's nothing we can do to help Ukraine. So this is just a shot of morphine so that Zelensky can get a nice little warm buzz before the pain returns.
Well, let me ask you this. How dangerous is Germany becoming under Chancellor Merz?
Oh, good.
The potential's there. Let me remind people of something. Back in 1943, there was the Quebec Conference, and that's where Churchill and Roosevelt got together to sort of talk about what the world's going to look like after the defeat of Nazi Germany. And Churchill came out and said, man, these Germans, they keep coming back. We had the World War I is German. Some people argue that it might be British, but from the British perspective, it was the Germans' fault. In World War II, Nazi Germany, maybe Churchill said we need to strip Germany of all its industry and just make it an agrarian nation. And Roosevelt went a step further. He said, no, the problem isn't industry. The problem is the Germans. And unless we castrate them all, we're going to continue to have a problem, because they're going to continue to reproduce. And, that's what we need to finish. And so that's where Henry Morgenthau, the Secretary of Treasury, came in with the Morgenthau Plan, which was to break Germany up into small components, deindustrialize it, and then starve them to death, lose 30, 50% of the population, and leave a reduced Germany there, because that's the only way Europe would ever be safe. Because if you let Germany be Germany, Germany does what? Nationalism, industrialism, militarism combined, you get the Fourth Reich. And that's what we have today. We have the Fourth Reich. The only good news is that, Merz doesn't have the firm support of the German people. He could easily come up with a vote of no confidence. And the intentions of the German government to become a new Fourth Reich aren't matched by the capability, the actual capability. The German people are not a militarized society, no matter how much Rheinmetall and the other German industrialists want to do these things. Their economy is incapable of the kinds of sustained military industrial production necessary to do this. And so, they have this dream, this vision that they can't yet implement. But the problem is that vision's there. We now have Mertz literally saying that this time we're going to do it right, meaning that we failed the last time. Well, what did you fail at? World domination, killing the Jews, murdering the Russians. I mean, yeah, you failed at that, and it's a damn good thing you did. And now what? He wants to do it again? Let's the American people wake up. Pro hint: send 5 divisions of American forces now, occupy Berlin, and eliminate the German government. It'll be easy to do right now. If you don't, we're going to have to do it 20 years from now when the Fourth Reich is there and these people who are pretending to be our friends suddenly become something else.
So I'm going to stop that right there. I don't know if I quite agree with Scott on his view of Germany and Germans at this point in the evolution of Germany. I know Germany has its problems, and it's got a lot of anti-democracy going on internally in Germany because the established parties won't share power with some of the upcoming parties, and they're frustrating, democracy inside of Germany. But I think Germany as a society is very far from the Nazi model, right at this point. They do have to get rid of Mertz, but I think Scott would agree that some pretty big failures are going to be coming up for the government of Mertz, right now in Germany. Some people have been saying that he is a Nazi, that a Nazi has taken over Germany again. But if so, I don't think that Nazi is going to last for very long. And I think that's quite clear. And so I don't think we really have to worry about some of the radical solutions that Scott was giving voice to in that particular video. They were, I think, a little on the extreme side. But I do understand the visceral fear of Germany based on the experiences of the Second World War. I don't think the condemnation of Germany in the First World War was really justified. The actions of that war, among all the nations involved, were pretty extreme, and I don't think Germany was exceptionally brutal or exceptionally uncivilized in its actions in that particular war compared to the British or the French or the Americans or any of the other participants in that particular war. But that's a subject for another day and a subject, for another time. The basic point here is that Scott and I both agree Germany doesn't have the capability to be really dangerous to Russia, at this point. But they do have the capability to upset, the balance if the Taurus or similar missiles are fired into Russia and the Russians retaliate in some of the ways they've been talking about. For example, if we start getting the Russians retaliating to the use of German missiles by the Ukrainians to shoot deeply into Russia, if the Russians begin to retaliate with some of the Oreshniks sent into the industrial areas of Germany, that's going to be, that's going to be a very provocative kind of exchange, which is going to get us much closer to World War III. Though some people, of course, are saying that we're in World War III right now. But I don't want to argue that particular point, but at least in relation to exchanges in Europe, direct exchanges between the European nations and Russia. We're not seeing that yet. I mean, everybody is going through the Ukrainians at this point. And that's something I don't want to see. That is going to be a great escalation towards the intense kind of World War III we don't want to see. So I wanted to make that point. Okay, Dee, do you have anything to add?
No, not right now.
Okay, did you like that video from Scott?
It was an interesting perspective where Germany is concerned. I hadn't really, thought of it in that extreme.
Yeah, I think the government of Merz is causing people to think of Germany in a more extreme way than has been the case for a long time, because he appears to be a closet sort of Nazi, and that's been coming out of late.
It seems the Nazis are coming out everywhere. We see Netanyahu, what he's doing.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
right. We see various kinds and varieties of Nazis coming out everywhere. Right, I agree. Steve Gunzer says Trump challenged AOC and Jasmine Crockett to an intelligence test, calling them low IQ.
Oh, Mr. Low IQ himself.
I'd be happy to be a moderator of those intelligence tests.
Oh.
I'm quite sure that Trump would end up on the extremely low side. Because on intelligence tests, there are definite answers to those questions, and Trump won't be able to lie about them.
I don't even think he really knows what he's talking about half the time. He just blathers things out. He blathers things out that he thinks his followers are going to cheer about.
Yeah, I think that's what he does. He doesn't care whether what he says is true or not. Jeff Tanton says Trump also says that weed makes you lose IQ points, and Biden is 10 years behind the curve when it comes to the endocannabinoid system. Most of the world already knows about it. Yes. Steve Day says real causes, Trump, MAD, LOL. And he also says who has the most nukes. The most nukes are held by Russia, including the most nukes that are deployed, right now. But the United States is very close to Russia in terms of the most nukes that are deployed at this point. In other words, nukes are deployed and nukes are, in reserve, and nukes are, retired. Okay, the retired nukes, can be unretired, and the reserve nukes can be deployed. So there are these three categories of nukes. But when you look at the nukes, that are immediately available, the deployed nukes, I believe that the United States and Russia are pretty much equal. So there is that. I think China is way behind the first two, and Israel has about 200 altogether, based on various estimates I've seen. So Steve Volpran says, I'm back. Steve Day says, finish the job, Iran. Steve Day says, Israel entered Syria today. I guess I commented that already. Evelyn says, wasn't Israel already there? Yes. Don Foster says, I read that one already. Steve Gonzo says, right now in Tel Aviv, many teens are burning their draft orders. We won't take part in genocide. We won't, serve apartheid. What kind of Steve Gonza says, what kind of low you talking about, I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Steve. Sorry. So we are at a high point of our attendance for the evening. That is good to see. We have now our final video. And by the way, folks, we're pretty much on schedule here. Not too much over. And to end the stream, we have a very interesting video. Colonel Macgregor. And that should take us about 40 minutes or so to go through. Okay.
Colonel Macgregor, my friend, thank you very much for coming here. Before we get into
Don't settle for less. Here's what others are doing to fix missing and broken teeth. The company everyone has been raving about is called
Big Picture, about how volatile and dangerous Ukraine has become and the Middle East has become. President Trump, just about 15 minutes ago, it's now Monday, early Monday afternoon, announced a seismic shift, a dramatic increase in the amount of arms the United States would be sending to Ukraine through a circuitous route of selling them to allies who will then either sell them or give them to Ukraine. But the numbers are vastly increased over what they were even in the Biden administration. How do you read this, Colonel?
Well, I suppose if we look at it from the standpoint of what could have been announced and wasn't announced, it probably is not nearly as dangerous as it could have otherwise been. Originally, there were discussions of trying to impose a no-fly zone, which did make a lot of sense since the Russians very rarely fly manned aircraft over Ukraine. Virtually everything is unmanned or missiles or drones, whatever you want to call them. So that didn't make a lot of sense. Then there was this discussion of monumental tariffs that would be imposed on Russia, and it looks like President Trump has backed away from that, punting the whole thing 50 days into the future, which I think is probably the least damaging thing he could do for himself at this point. So what are these weapons? I don't know. I mean, obviously we're going to try and send them Patriot missiles. I don't know what else we have planned. I don't see us providing any of the standard missile family, SM-2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. So I don't know what else we're giving them or selling to our allies. I don't know what the allies are going to provide. I was prepared for a stupid comment endorsing the decision of Chancellor Merz to use Taurus missiles against the Russians for the purpose of attacking the manufacturing facilities inside Russia that turn out so many weapons and missiles and rockets and so forth. Didn't hear that. So on the one hand, I think the glass is half full. In other words, it could have been much worse. And I don't know that what we're sending is really going to have much impact. I really don't think it will.
What do they think they're accomplishing? I mean, I don't want to get too political, Colonel, because I want to prevail upon your military expertise. In the same breath in which he made this announcement, he said, it's Joe Biden's war, it's not my war. It is his war if he's going to continue and even increase the rate of military supplies. So, bigger picture, have the neocons become triumphant? Is this Lindsey Graham waging the war?
Well, I don't think Lindsey Graham could be very happy right now because he had hoped to achieve more. And I think he did the best that he could do in terms of manipulating President Trump. If you go back and listen to Graham's comments, which I reviewed earlier this morning because I was too busy yesterday to do so. And he talked about saying, well, Putin has got to learn that you cannot play Trump. And that really struck me as an interesting statement because that kind of statement would really appeal to President Trump. Nobody can play me. I'm Trump. You know, I'm the tough guy. I'm the boss. You can't play me. Putin's not going to play me. Well, of course, that's all irrelevant nonsense. Has nothing to do with actually what's happening on the ground, never did. But I'm sure that that appealed in some ways to President Trump. But then in the subsequent 24 hours, I think President Trump began to look at some, grim realities. We have 8 days worth of missiles right now in our inventory. I'm talking about Standard missiles, Patriot missiles. I don't know how many theater high altitude defense missiles we have. But the point is, after 8 days, we run out. And my sources inside the Department of Defense say, after 8 days, the conventional war is over and you have to go to a nuclear weapon. And I don't think President Trump wants to do that. So I think what he's doing is pretty typical for what most politicians do, Judge. He wants to be a little bit pregnant. Well, how do you get a little bit pregnant? Well, you give some things, but not everything. So in the final analysis, what has he changed? Nothing. Nothing fundamentally has changed at this point. And
So notice Scott Ritter and Colonel Macgregor agree that there won't be much impact of what Trump has talked about it, that it won't really change anything. And that's kind of the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Part is that my sources, and I do have some inside the administration, tell me that behind the scenes, there are talks between Moscow and Washington at very high levels, and they seem to be going well. So, this is more of the same. It's politicians don't like to be decisive. They don't like to take firm positions unless they're absolutely confident that everything will go their way. So I think what you're getting from President Trump is half a loaf, which in the final analysis on the battlefield will be no loaf at all.
Here's the clip to which I think you're referring from Senator Graham. Chris, cut number 2.
I expect in the coming days, you will see weapons flowing at a record level to help Ukraine defend themselves. I expect in the coming days that there will be tariffs and sanctions available to President Trump he's never had before. I expect in the coming days more support from Europe regarding their efforts to help Ukraine. Putin made a miscalculation here. For 6 months, President Trump tried to entice Putin to the table. The attacks have gone up, not down. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest miscalculations Putin has made is to play Trump. And you just watch. In the coming days and weeks, there's going to be a massive effort to get Putin to the table. And to those who are helping him, China buying cheap Russian oil and having no accountability, those days are about over.
How naive is he if he thinks that President Putin would come to the table, using his phrase?
This Italian trick with raw tomato is making prostate surgeries drop across Europe. And in the US, the industry has already tried to block this video 3 times. Over 70%.
Before his military objectives, which he's on the cusp of reaching, have been achieved.
Well, it's absurd. And again, President Putin has always made his position, the position of Russia, very, very clear. That's never changed. The real question here is, why should the Russians believe anything we say? This goes all the way back to the coup in 20.
That is the real question here. Why should they believe anything the U.S. has to say, given recent history? I mean, come on. Nobody can trust anything we say.
Mm-hmm.
14, the subsequent Minsk Accords, the arms control arrangements that we unilaterally dismissed out of hand is unnecessary. Why believe anything we say? And I think President Putin has been very straightforward and honest with President Trump. And people keep telling President Trump, well, he has to give something. If he doesn't give up his position in some way, you lose. You have to be a winner. This is the confusing aspect of the whole thing, because President Trump was far more rational 8 or 9 months ago when he recognized there was nothing happening in this area called Eastern Ukraine that justified the expenditure of American blood and treasure, nothing to be won, and that he really wanted to end the war. But every time he's tried to end the war, he's got people like Lindsey Graham saying, now, come on there, President, you've been played. Don't you understand? You've been played. And that kind of thing, I think, sadly resonates with President Trump. You listen to him on the golf course, and he says, "You've been playing. You can't allow this to happen." It's a lot of nonsense. We don't have any interest whatsoever in what happens in eastern Ukraine. We never did. And Trump has always had it within his power to end this thing by simply declaring that and pulling out. But we want to be seen, or President Trump wants to be seen, as the heroic figure that brought about peace. Well, that's not going to happen.
Right, right. I wonder if Senator Graham and his colleagues that agree with him still think they can use the war in Ukraine as a battering ram with which to drive President Putin from office. We haven't heard that articulated recently at all.
No, look, they still live in a fantasy world. As we've said repeatedly from the beginning, they continue to believe the nonsense that Russia is weak, that Russian society is fragile, that Putin is a quote unquote hated dictator. We are the good liberal Democrats that want to bring peace and happiness everywhere, which in reality means we want to bring in a bunch of some of the lowest forms of human life in the private sector to rape Russia, steal everything they can from it while we put a puppet in Moscow. Well, that's failed. That's not going to happen. Now people are really turning their attention to try and repeat that process against Iran. But as far as Russia is concerned, that's over. And this is not going to affect anything the Russians do. They're going to proceed as scheduled. And, 50 days is an interesting selection. In 50 days, the Russians could be standing on the Polish border.
Right, right. You mentioned Iran, Colonel. Did Trump's bombing of Iran make the Middle?
No, I'm sorry. I guess I have to say something about that. Yes, in 50 days, the Russians could be standing on the Polish border. But, in this video, I think Doug is pulling no punches at all. He is right there. He is saying, I think, exactly what he thinks. And it's a pretty harsh condemnation of the thinking of the Trump administration. Again, I need to put thinking in quotes.
Least more stable or more volatile?
Not only is it more volatile, we are at war with Iran, and people don't seem to understand it. Simply because President Trump dropped bombs and then said, well, that's it. Now we want peace. I'm sending over coffee and sandwiches this afternoon, and we're going to get along and work together, is irrelevant. We are a co-belligerent with Israel at war in the region. And effectively, we're at war with everybody because Israel's at war with everyone at this stage. So, I think people don't understand. There was an Israeli named Yanon who back in the 1980s set forth a plan for the region. And it didn't work out quite as anticipated, but 40 years later, it now rings true. And he simply said, our first goal in the region is fragmentation, division. In other words, break up the region into smaller packets that are more easily managed by us. In addition to that, once they're fragmented, we want to pit them against each other. Then we want to subjugate, clean up, and ultimately resettle areas with Jews, replacing the populations who are there. That's what Bibi Netanyahu is all about. That's what he's doing. It's kind of interesting if you go back and look at Sharon and Gaza. We had problems with what Sharon was doing in Gaza in about 2001 through 2003. And ultimately, President Bush at the time told Sharon to get out of Gaza. And ultimately, they got out. He wanted to go in there and bulldoze houses and level places. And we said, we're not going to support that. Get out of Gaza. So he got out of Gaza. He came up with this new arrangement. It turned Gaza into a larger concentration camp, but at least it ended the intrusive measures by the Israelis on the ground. They got out, and the idea was they would focus on securing Israel.
There are 3 areas on a man's body that show he's likely got a hormone problem: chest fat, love.
Well, the roles have changed. It's no longer a question of the president telling the prime minister of Israel what to do. Right now, it is Bibi Netanyahu who tells Donald Trump what he wants him to do. And that's the true change that's happened over the last 20 plus years.
What do you think they talked about last week. And do you think there's any connection between Netanyahu's presence in the White House for 3 meetings in 2 days and the announcement that there is no Epstein client list, Epstein, a notorious Mossad asset?
I think it's hopeless. It's like you can't make this sort of thing up. Now on the internet is an audio tape of Epstein talking about Trump, who he's known for 20 years. It's terribly damaging. The truth of the matter is that if anything is going to drag President Trump down and destroy his administration at this point, it's Epstein. There's no question about it. And pretending that Epstein doesn't exist, or that's old news, or the file magically disappeared, all of those things are not going to work. Coming clean about the whole thing was always the best idea. But clearly, coming clean about it would expose President Trump to very, very severe criticism. Nevertheless, I still think it would be better to risk that than not. But then again, I'm not in the White House. I'm not advising it. But normally, somebody once said, a businessman said to his son, "Believe me, son, honesty is the best policy in business." I know, I've tried both. And I think that applies to politics. So I think President Trump would be better off standing up, taking the medicine, however painful it might be, and being honest and doing what he's doing. This is just going to metastasize. Epstein is going to get worse and worse and worse.
Colonel, I'm going to play a clip which you may have seen. It's not a new one. It's President Putin in 2017, basically in his own words saying, no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain. American foreign policy doesn't change. I think you'll probably agree with this. Chris, cut number 7.
I have a certain perspective. You see, I've already spoken with one U.S. president and another and a third. Presidents come and go, but the policy doesn't change. Do you know why? Because the power of the bureaucracy is very strong. So someone gets elected, comes in with their own ideas, and then people show up with briefcases, well-dressed, wearing dark suits like mine, but not with a red tie, more like a black or dark blue one. And they start explaining how things should be done. And everything changes right away. You see what I mean? This happens from one administration to the next.
Is he right? Is Trump his own man, or does the deep state tell him what to do?
Well, what is the deep state? The Israel lobby, the war lobby, the people in the pharmaceutical industries.
The intelligence community.
Yeah, the intelligence committee, obviously. So I think, he simplified it. It's a very Russian simplification. Men in dark suits show up and tell you what to do. Stalin
not with red ties, but with black or navy ties.
Yeah, but Stalin was famous because he had suggested to the leader, the man who ran the NKVD in the 1930s, black trucks would have painted on the side meat. And these black trucks would show up in the middle of the night in front of a building. People would be pulled out, dragged in, go into the black truck, and they would disappear. They would end up in the gulag or just be executed, out of hand. But the joke was they painted meat on the side of it. So everybody that was visiting Russia, who was a foreigner, said, "Oh, look at this. Stalin's doing such a marvelous job. He's providing meat to everyone." People didn't know what the hell was going on. So that's very Russian, for him to sort of characterize it that way. But it's a little more subtle, but it's real. But on the other hand, there's something else happening that I don't even think Putin understands. And this is very important. If you go back to 1914, at the time that Franz Josef was assassinated in July, and everybody went.
Okay. It was Franz Ferdinand, the son of Franz Josef, who was assassinated to start to start the First World War. Okay, Franz Josef was the emperor, okay, of the Austrian Empire at the time. So
through there in June, and then all the month of July, people went through these discussions. What happens next? What should we do? We end up in this terrible war. In Britain, the British were looking at a very serious problem. The British Empire was already declining in strength and power. Its industries could no longer keep pace with Germany's or with the United States industries. It wasn't producing steel in the quantity that was required. Its manufacturing base was already old. It was no longer infused with new technology because new technology tends to reduce production costs. Production costs were actually rising in Britain, not declining. Germany was marching well ahead. And so the British decided, since they had an unemployment problem and serious problems with their industries and they were in decline, that they had a choice. They could do one of two things. They could say, no, we're not going to go to war. What we're going to do is we're going to recognize that we have to reform our economic structure. We have to pull back. We have to re-examine the way we govern. In other words, go through this whole process of re-examination. They didn't do that. It was far easier in their minds at the time to declare war. And so they went to war with a nation they had never fought. No German-speaking soldier had ever fought an English-speaking soldier. Never. And it was a catastrophe for Great Britain, and they come out of the war even worse off than they were when they went in, and the rest is history. World War II simply finished Britain as a great power. We face a similar situation today. We've fallen behind. We don't have much of a manufacturing base, as we've discussed before. We have the sovereign national debt. We can't deal with it effectively. Are we going to raise taxes? No. Are we going to repudiate it? Well, not yet. Then what are we going to do with it? Do we debase the currency to try and inflate our way out? What do we do? No real decision is being made. So we're in a position similar to the British Empire in 1914. I don't think President Trump wants to go to war, but he is being pulled in that direction by numbers of people who think that this is a way out of the conundrum. And one of those is Bibi Netanyahu, because this war in the region is not over by any stretch of the imagination. He knows that. His goals are not achieved. And Israel is in a position where it either establishes unchallenged Jewish supremacy in the region, or in his mind, Israel can't exist. So he has to fight. That means we have to fight. And if we do, we'll end up like Britain did after the First World War.
So I am hearing you say, Colonel, that we are.
So that prediction, okay, is really pretty definite. He's saying, if we follow the Israelis down the rabbit hole, we will be defeated. And we will be, let us say, severely diminished as a great power.
And I don't think people in the USA get it.
I don't think people in this country get it either. They think we're far more powerful, than we are. How many people know that we have 8 days of inventory, of missile inventory left, okay, in our arsenal? How many people know the Russians don't have days of inventory because they're producing as much missiles as they use every day? So their inventory is staying constant. We just are outmatched right now because we allowed our industrial base to go overseas so that rich folks could make greater profits. It was a class warfare kind of thing. We didn't want to pay the wages here, so our industries went overseas for lower wages. There were tax incentives, for them to relocate. So we lost a good part of our industrial base. Now, I don't think our industrial base is completely gone. We still produce lots and lots of things. We still have lots and lots of capability. But relatively speaking, we don't have the kind of capability now than we had prior to World War II, let us say, or in the period, just after World War II. We had huge industrial capability at that time. especially with respect to heavy industry, especially with respect to the kind of industry that could be converted to the production of weapons. And instead, now, for things that are essential for our weapons, we're relying on foreign sources of supply. That means that foreign nations can choke our sources of supply and slow down the production of weapons, that we need. Furthermore, we've let ourselves get into a position where we have only 8 days of inventory of missiles left. Now, that means that we've had a severe failure, of planning. I mean, even if you don't consider that we deindustrialized, if we had the capability to get, the materials we needed for missiles from trading, yet our procurement planning was not sufficient to support what we wanted to do in the Ukraine war. The fact was, there was a planning failure. If there hadn't been a planning failure, we wouldn't be down to 8 days of missiles left. I mean, it's just a gross failure. There's no question about that. It's a gross failure not to have a domestic capability to produce these things, at least if we want to be the hegemon of the world. And it's a gross failure not to have traded for the materials we need to produce the weapons we need. In other words, we treated it as basically going on a just-in-time sort of basis, as if we were a private company that would never have a problem in getting inventories. We just didn't plan on any supply chain problems. Even when one of the countries we think of as our enemies is one of our major suppliers in so many areas. I mean, let's just ask the obvious question. What kind of idiots did we have in the military sector? What kinds of idiots do we have in Congress to have allowed such a situation, to develop? Now, I'm not unhappy, that it developed, because I would like the United States to stop getting involved in wars all over the world. But from the standpoint of the goals that these people had, the fact is they've committed gross failures in planning. And that, for no other reason than that, they should be totally replaced. Anyway, let us go on, because they're incompetent.
Co-belligerents with NATO and Ukraine against Russia. We are co-belligerents with Netanyahu and Israel against Iran. Are we slouching toward World War III?
Well, we're also continuing to try and argue that we are confronting this thing called aggressive China over Taiwan. In other words, that we're still committed to the crazy, insane notion that we're going to wage war against the largest country in the world, whose missile arsenal makes Iran's look small and insignificant by comparison, and that somehow or another we're going to prevent the Chinese from establishing control over Taiwan. At the same time that we do that, the Chinese are ramping up because they see it as a threat to them. This is analogous to Cuba, an island offshore of the United States that has turned into an attack dog against us. So it's not just the two that you mentioned, it's all three. And we are really, really, really in over our heads. We're overwhelmed with logistical requirements that we can't meet. We can't sustain ourselves around the world in all three theaters. But no one wants to make the hard decision, which is what I talked about in the beginning. Do we back off? Do we recognize the problems we have at home? Do we deal with those problems, reform the economy, reform the way we govern, and move down a different road? In other words, do we willingly yield our political military hegemony over the globe? Because that's really what this is all about. Putin spoke earlier within the last 12 to 14 hours in an interview. And he said something that everyone in Washington should listen to. He said either Russia is independent and sovereign or it does not exist. So when you threaten Russia, you threaten it over the issues in Ukraine because those are existential for the Russians. They can't allow a hostile state to emerge there and threaten their existence. If you say you're going to sanction them beyond anything they've ever seen with the goal of destroying their economy, they're saying we will fight. He's being polite about it. He's not bloviating the way President Trump would do. He's not saying, I'm going to crush them, I'm going to break it. He doesn't talk that way. These people are professionals in Moscow and Beijing. They're even professional in Tehran. They don't engage in this kind of rhetoric. But we need to understand something. He's serious. Either they are sovereign and independent or they don't exist.
Here's just how serious he is. Cut number 6.
Russia will either be independent and sovereign or will not exist at all. I wanted to convey this to our partners in the hope that they would hear and somehow adjust their attitude towards Russia, considering that, for instance, since the 1990s they promised us not to expand NATO to the east. They lied at every step, constantly deceiving and pretending that nothing of the kind happened. The same was true on many other issues. Therefore, it seemed to me that it was about time to tell our colleagues, we need to live peacefully. Let's somehow treat each other with respect, without imposing our will, without attempting to suppress another will, considering the interests of all participants in international communication. I don't know how effective it was, but since it's often remembered, it seems it was timely. That's what I want to say. But unfortunately, it was not heard. We constantly, I want to emphasize, constantly made attempts to establish relations to not lead to the situation we are in today and to develop some common rules. Orthodox.
By the way, it's necessary to introduce something here. The name, Ivan the Terrible for Ivan IV. In the West, his reign is interpreted as one that was very brutal and very cruel. And so he was known, as the Terrible. But the actual translation of the nickname he was given in Russia, is Ivan the Awesome, not Ivan the Terrible. That difference is an important one. Inside of Russia, he was a popular Tsar who accomplished a lot, for Russia. And that's why his name was Ivan the Awesome, as opposed to Ivan the Terrible.
A legend immediately arose that he was cruel, a tyrant, that he was insane, and so on. Although no one recalls in such a context what was done by Oliver Cromwell, what happened in England.
So of course what happened in England, under Cromwell, was a dictatorship. Cromwell had a dictatorship. He did a lot of good things for England also, but there's no question that he ran a dictatorship, for a while, and that there was a lot of cruelty under Cromwell also. But there aren't these extreme tales that have grown up, around Cromwell.
In France. The Western history is silent about this.
And when he's talking about France, he's probably speaking of the revolution in France and the reign of terror, during the 1790s in France, and how tales have grown in the West about, how cruel the Republicans were, in using the guillotine on, the opponents of the Republic. Putin knows his history, and he uses it, very well in reasoning.
In any case, it does not give such evaluations as that it was barbarism, that civilization is absent. But they tried to subordinate Russia even then.
Tried to subordinate Russia even then. A very, very smart and astute and articulately presented analysis, as you point out. How close are we to World War III?
I think the Russians, the Chinese, even the Iranians would still like to do business with us. I don't think they have yet reached the position where they understand that it is impossible to do business with us, given our attitudes and our behavior. I still think they think something better can be devised. Now, how much longer will that last? I don't know. I mean, at some point, everyone becomes frustrated and fed up and says, we've had enough. You know, just as I was pointing out, Cuba lies in the Caribbean. What happens on the island of Cuba is of consequence to us. Now, how they govern themselves internally, that really doesn't make any difference. But how they connect with other countries, what kinds of technology other countries introduce into Cuba, particularly countries that are hostile to us, well, then that becomes a national security matter. That's the same thing with Taiwan and China. There's no difference whatsoever. When you go to Ukraine, Ukraine lies on Russia's border. Eastern Ukraine presents a real existential threat to Russia, given what we've done to build up that part of the world and attack Russia. So these things are hard to avoid. The same thing is true in Iran. The Iranians are not virulently, incurably anti-American. They would like to do business with us. But how do you do business with a country that says they're backing an Israeli strategy, which is designed to utterly fragment, disintegrate, destroy Iran? And now we've widened the war because we've extended it to Azerbaijan. So now we have Azerbaijan in the mix, which is designed to break up this BRICs transportation network that would run from southern Iran all the way up into Russia and Europe and vice versa. That is sort of an added bonus of encouraging Azerbaijan to invade northern Iran with the hope of once again dividing and fragmenting and destroying Iran as a state. We are all over the map, Judge. I'm not even sure that President Trump understands the extent to which the CIA, working with MI6 and the Mossad, operates independently. I don't think anybody's been in to brief him on the subversive activities they engage in, and no one has made clear what the implications are strategically. Because I think if he understood it, he would not be comfortable. But I don't think he knows. I don't think he fully grasps it. Maybe it is because he doesn't read anything. He won't sit still for any lengthy discussions. He tries to oversimplify too much. And then when you're surrounded by people like Lindsey Graham and the Israeli influencers and others inside the White House, I guess it's very hard to penetrate the veil of deception and reach the truth, which I guess is where he is.
Thank you for an extraordinary analysis, Colonel Macgregor. Deeply appreciated, my dear friend. Thank you for accommodating my schedule.
Okay, so that's it for that. But the important thing to take away from that is we are close to World War III if Trump does not come to understand that we have to recognize the limitations in our military capability, that we have to realistically compare our military capability with the military capability of the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the alliances they have with the North Koreans. And we have to be very realistic about that. And these opponents have a great advantage over us in relation to missile capability at this point. and their missile capability is decisive in the regional areas that they would fight in. That applies to the Chinese, okay, that applies to the Russians, and that applies to the Iranians, as we are now seeing in each of these areas of conflict in Eastern Europe, in West Asia, okay, and in the Far East. We are at a disadvantage in relation to those weapons that matter from the standpoint of destroying the capabilities that we and our allies have. If we recognized what the realities in those three areas were, we would conclude that we can't get into wars in those areas. That recognizing the realities means not challenging the dominant powers in those areas, not challenging at least their very existence. We've been challenging the very existence of Iran and the very existence, okay, of Russia. And we've been making serious challenges to China as well. These challenges are foolhardy when we consider the military balance that exists, okay, in each of these areas. Okay, now you may argue, well, I haven't taken into account or haven't been speaking about the military balance with respect to nuclear weapons, and that there we are much more equal to these other powers. Okay, that is true, but the problem is that we cannot use our nuclear weapons without risking the total destruction of everybody. We came to realize that a long, long time ago. That situation has not changed from the 1960s. If anything, it's gotten more clear that a nuclear war would be destructive, okay, for everyone. So the fact is, we cannot use our nuclear weapons. It is too risky to use them. If we try to use them, we're going to regret that. That means we have to accept the disadvantages we have in the conventional area, and we have to return to areas that we can defend with the military capabilities we have now, or the military capabilities we're going to have in, the coming years, the near future. Now, if we want to greatly increase our military capability, we can try to do that, but it would involve putting our society on a war footing, and it would involve changing our economic structure and changing our social structure so that we became one of the leading industrial powers of the world again, competitive with China, okay, and Russia in their areas. So if we want to make that choice, we can make that choice, but it would still not be years, and perhaps never, before we could compete with the power that Russia and China and Iran have in the regional areas that they are, are located in. What we're talking about is creating a capability that allows us to project our power across the oceans. Now, we could do that in World War II because of the nature of the rest of the world. But increasingly, we cannot adequately project our power. And we can see that because when we go into foreign countries, we don't win wars anymore. At best, we have stalemates. We are terribly destructive. We ruin everything, but we don't win. And we don't win because when we're not willing to reorganize our society and change our lives to make the kinds of commitments we would have to make in order to project power in those other areas. So since we don't wish to change our society that way, what we need to do is withdraw from these other areas and let the dominant powers in these areas be the dominant powers in these areas. We cannot be the dominant power all over the world. In fact, even looking into the Western Hemisphere, if we look to the future here, it's quite clear Brazil is going to be the dominant power in South America. In the long run, there's nothing we can do about that. We might as well start accepting that now and being collaborative, with the Brazilians, realizing they're going to be the number one power in South America. Okay, we should also realize, that Mexico is a relatively large and powerful state, that's near us, and that we need to be collaborative, with Mexico for our own security and our own sakes. And the same with Canada. They're not, of course, as large in population, as other nations are, but they are both a significant power and would be a significant defender of our security if we're collaborative with them. Of course, Trump's actions in the tariff areas, are putting all that, at risk, because we're not running the kind of foreign policy that's protecting our backyard here, our security in our backyard, by seeing to it that everybody here is very collaborative with us. So our foreign policy all over the world is screwed up. It's not in line with the reality across the world and not in line with the reality of our actual military capabilities. We need to bring all this in line. Now Doug Macgregor has actual proposals for this, which he's been writing down for some time. I don't think I necessarily agree with all of his proposals because his ideology from the standpoint of domestic policy and domestic economics and the ordering of domestic society is very different, from the way that I see the world. But I totally agree with him that in line with our military capability, we have to concern ourselves with our home grounds and our backyards here in our hemisphere. And we have to let the rest of the world be the rest of the world and withdraw. So that is the bottom line for me tonight. I hope you enjoyed this stream. I thought that the confluence of all 5 of the videos, was very important. And of course, in closing, we have to recognize the continued and growing importance, of BRICs. And for our own good, we need to make plans to tie in with BRICs and to make common cause with them, to develop the whole world and create a prosperous situation for everyone and collaborative economic policies for everyone. If we were collaborative and we were really interested in recognizing the multipolar nature of the world, I think the BRICS nations would be likely to welcome us, including the Russians and the Iranians, and the Chinese, as Duck said, as Duck pointed out. He thinks they still want to do business with us. They still want to be peaceful with us. If we would craft a foreign policy that reciprocated these desires of them, and we participated as a co-equal with them instead of as the hegemon, they would welcome that, and they would welcome us. So, Dee, anything to add?
Okay, I just had to mute off. I just thought it was really good how you presented everything that's going on and how the U.S., especially in the West, is just so out of sync with everything that's going on.
Yes. Just so out of sync, clinging to old models.
Yes, and we're not even prepared that if there's a strike here on U.S. soil. When you talk about something that the U.S. doesn't think anything's going to happen to us. Like we're these super brave people. And we've got everything. We've got the best technology. We are superior to everyone.
Yes, and there we have to recognize the reality of things too. We do not have the air defenses even to block conventional attacks from weapons such as the Oreshniks. I know the Oreshniks, they're intermediate range missile, and they don't have the range to reach the United States, generally speaking. But it would not take much for the Russians to modify the Oreshniks.
No.
To give them an intercontinental, range. I'm going to estimate, and I think I'm right in this estimate, because of the background in missilery which the Russians have had over the last 50 years or so. They could produce intercontinental types of Oreshniks within 6 months, to use against us, so that they won't even have to use, their nuclear ballistic missiles. But my point here is, we don't have a defense against a hypersonic missile, such as the Oreshniks. And we also don't have a defense against the explosive power that they have. So they could do huge damage to the United States, to our major cities. And we don't have a defense against that. And there's no indication that we're building defenses against that. We have to recognize, even in the area of our air defense system, in spite of all the fancy missiles and all the fancy names, it's generally recognized in the world at present, I believe, that the Russian air defense systems, the S-400s and the S-500s, are superior to anything that we have here in the United States. Now, if we really care about our defense, we cannot allow that kind of situation to exist. We should be moving heaven and earth to develop air defense systems that are at least as good as theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not doing that. I mean, we haven't made a major advance in air defense, since the development of THAAD. And the THAADs are what, 20 years old now or something like that? What have we been doing through this period of time? I mean, I think there's been a tremendous failure in military planning here in the United States. And
Definitely.
Considering the amount of money we've been spending on our military planning and our military industrial complex, we're not getting value in line with the funds we're spending. We're letting the people in the military industrial complex get away with murder in terms of what they're actually delivering in terms of capability. We haven't had, any new developments in tanks for a long time. I mean, how old is the Abrams now? Okay, we don't have much advance in the bomber area. We've got stealth bombers that move at 650 miles per hour. I mean, those things are slow. The air defense systems of the Russians can knock them down.
And yet Lindsey Graham and all his ilk they seem to think the U.S. is superior to everybody else.
Lindsey Graham is an ignoramus.
Definitely.
The only area in which we may still have superiority is the area of nuclear submarines. But I think the Russians are pretty formidable in that area also, and our relative superiority may not be important in case of a nuclear war. That is, either power may be capable of delivering nuclear weapons from their nuclear submarines.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Chinese are a bit behind in this area, but I don't trust, my knowledge of what the Chinese have in this area, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they couldn't catch up to the rest of us in 2 or 3 years, because they're so good when they set their mind to do something.
Exactly, they are, and they work smart.
They work smart and they work hard,
Yes.
and they get good value for their money from their people because their planning systems are very effective. They're not too highly centralized, but they're centralized enough to guide and to get value. But they make there's quite a lot of advantage in the decentralization they have and the incentives to innovate, okay, that they have in these areas. They're very well organized in that way, and they're
Mhm.
producing very good products across the whole range of high technology products. And we see that.
Yes.
And we don't pay attention to how they're doing it. We get ideological about it. That they're doing socialism, so we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not doing socialism in any classical sense. I mean, what they're doing is much more similar to the old American Hamiltonian system that we started out with. And we just don't recognize that they're doing the same thing that we did and that we have ceased to do a long time ago because we have made room for the development of our oligarchies here. So I guess we've reached a point where we can say goodnight, Dee.
Yes, I'm extremely tired here.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll be on tomorrow evening, Wednesday evening, with Madeline Hoffman.
Okay, cool.
And we're going to be talking about Colombia. We're going to be talking about the meeting, the lateral coalition that arrived in Bogota, Colombia, to
Um, I,
uh,
I think you mean Bogota.
Bogota, to take action to stop Israelis' genocide. Um, despite all U.S. condemnation and sanctions against the UN and international courts, and they're having this meeting, and in that meeting, also about getting a force together to um, to operate in Gaza, to support the people of Gaza.
To actually protect the people of Gaza, right?
Yes,
Would be a
and
force by interposing, okay, an international force and basically daring the Israelis to attack them.
yeah, and they've had a petition. I sent around a petition about that too.
Yes,
Uh,
I saw it.
yes, so Madeline and I are going to be talking about that tomorrow, and she listened in on the meeting. There was a meeting this evening that she listened in on, and she shared the English version. So,
Oh, that's going to be great.
yeah, so we'll be talking about that tomorrow night.
Okay, very, very good. Okay, so good night, everyone. And I hope you'll go to D Stream tomorrow night. I'm sure it's going to be first class.
I think so too. It just seems to give you a sense of hope.
Yes. And we need that right now.
Yes.
My own sense of hope comes from the Iranians.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, I think they're so close to defeating the Israelis. And there's still fighting going on, even, day by day, because the Israelis are breaking the ceasefire and the Iranians are punishing them for it every time they do.
Hmm.
So more and more damage is being done to Israel, which I mean, I think is good because I think eventually it's going to bring the Israelis to the table.
Yes, and the Israelis have to experience what they're doing to others. They don't get it.
I think so too. I think so too. They have to experience that. And they have to realize that they have to stop it.
Right.
You have to recognize the only way to stop it is to recognize the rights of others and to do what's necessary to satisfy those rights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to say good night.
Well, good night, Dee.
Good night, and good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Okay, have a good evening, rest of your evening.
Okay, good night, everybody. Good night, Earl. I see you arrived.
Yes, good night, everyone.
And that's good. Okay. So I'm going to end the stream now. Thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming.